Hello and welcome to Byju's exam prep. I am Basavaraj. So we'll be discussing the continuation of ecology and environment, what we have left yesterday. So hope I am audible as well as visible to you all. Please confirm that I'm audible as well as visible to you all. Done. Good evening and warm welcome to all those who have joined and those who are joining for the classes. Right. So we were discussing about biodiversity. In that, we made an effort in understanding the aspects of bioinvasion and also the impact of bioinvasion. Plus, we made an effort in understanding many aspects of biodiversities, many aspects of biodiversities. Now, keeping those things in the mind, keeping all those things in the mind, now we'll try to understand the cause of biodiversity loss. So these all are important points. Bioinvasion is an important point. Hope spot is an important point. Then hotspots, all those are important points. And when you're reading your current affairs, always link that with the recent developments. If you are reading about the Western Ghats biodiversity hotspot, then you have to reconsider the two committees. One is referred as the Gadgil Committee and then Kasturirangan Committee. Gadgil Committee says that entire Western Ghat is ecological sensitive area, and he classified all the Western Ghats into three zones, right? And he made restriction in the zone 1, and hence around 64% of the Western Ghat is referred as protected area as per Gadgil Committee recommendation. Now, many people opposed that. They say that if we make it as a protected areas, then economic activities will be stopped there. Like hydroelectricity projects, permission will be stopped, mining activities will be stopped, agricultural practices will be stopped here. So that will make the people to lose employment opportunities. And that will create unemployment aspects and economic issues. So that's why all the 6 states opposed the Gadgil Committee. And hence the government appointed one more committee to consider the implementation of that or the recommendation of that. And that is called as Kasturirangan Committee. And Kasturirangan Committee classified entire Western Ghats into two parts: cultural landscape and natural landscape. Cultural landscape consisted of human settlements. And he says that wherever human settlements are there, if any national parks or wildlife sanctuaries are there, surrounding that national parks or wildlife sanctuaries up to 10 kilometers area, that area should be referred as ecological sensitive areas, which will act as a buffer zone or shock absorber for the protected areas in that part. And by that, 37% of the Western Ghats was referred as the protected areas. So even this was also opposed by the local people, because 37% is also more area compared to the total area of the Western Ghats. But the state governments, when they opposed that, the many issues were raised there due to floods, subsidence in 2020 and 21. In midst of that, Supreme Court told that you have to implement the Gadgil Committee report. Now, this is what the Supreme Court stand is there: to protect and conserve the hottest hotspot or biodiversity hotspot, that is Western Ghats. Is it clear? Now, we'll move on to something called as causes of biodiversity losses. What are the reasons for biodiversity losses? Now, here we come across many parts, like natural causes are there. Natural causes means it can be floods due to heavy rains, or cloud burstings, like the Kaziranga in Assam. Example, Kaziranga in Assam. Right. Then earthquakes, volcanic activities, etc. So because of that, large amount of losses will be there. The plants will be submerged, animals will be submerged, and many animals loses their life. So large amount of submergence and loss of life will be there. Submergence and loss of life when heavy floods takes place in that areas, right? So natural causes are there, sometimes subsidence, sometimes landslides. So all these are natural causes. Then habitat loss and fragmentation. Habitat loss and fragmentation means it is due to construction activities in that areas, like road construction or any projects like hydroelectricity projects, etc., where their habitats, where they are staying, their dwelling places are destroyed or disturbed. Their habitats are disturbed. Plus, the continuation of the forest is stopped. The continuation of forest is destroyed. So it means that these forests which are continuation, they are disturbed. Forest continuation is disturbed. So what happens when their habitats are destroyed or the continuation of forests are destroyed? And when the continuation of forests are destroyed, forests are like patches. Then the forest will be like patches, small patches. So hence, in both the conditions, the wild animals, they leave their habitat and they reach to the dwelling places or habitations. So these wild animals, they leave their habitats. They leave their habitats and reach to the areas where human settlements are there. In the human settlements. Now, when they enter into human settlements where agricultural crops are there or their working places are there, they always come in conflict with that. So this habitat loss and fragmentation, which creates the introduction of animals, wild animals, to the human settlements, which leads to man-animal conflict. Animal conflict. And in both the cases, we find the deaths will be there. Death of the wild animal, death of human beings, death of the cattle which are there. So hence, the man-animal conflict is referred as one of the major cause of loss of biodiversity. One of the major cause of biodiversity. Cause of the loss of biodiversity. So where wild animals are also killed, human beings are also killed, and also we find that the domesticated animals are also killed there. Then hunting and poaching. This is also seen as one of the rising factors, and hunting and poaching may be for their skin, maybe for medicinal part, maybe for the tusks in the context of elephants, etc. So this leads to large amount of death of the organisms here. The tusks, the horns of rhinoceros, etc., which are having extremely high economical values in the market. Hunting and poaching. Extension of agriculture. So we find that as the population is increasing, much of the forest areas are converted into agriculture. Example, we find them in Indonesia, where they are converted them into palm oil cultivation, and they are converted into rice fields. And we also find that many areas in Amazon basin, like Brazil, where we find the patches are converted into agriculture, and there they perform shifting agriculture or slash and burn. Shifting agriculture or slash and burn, which is detrimental to the animal resources there, which leads to large amount of deaths of animals and also the plant species there, which causes huge loss, where the natural habitats are destroyed. protected areas are destroyed. Then overexploitation of the resources. Overexploitation of resources. Why? Because of increasing of the population and because of needs which have been increased. Needs which have been increased. So this overexploitation of resources is something which we have seen already in the Earth's overshoot day. We have seen in Earth's overshoot day. Right. So where after that day, overexploitation of the resources is done. So hence they are diminishing in their existence. Then alien species invasion. And this already we have seen yesterday. Alien species invasion, which becomes a threat to the areas. Then global warming and climate change. Now here the global warming and climate change includes because of the changing of the wind patterns, changing of the pressure gradients. They are creating something called as droughts. Some areas they are receiving very high temperature. High temperatures are there. We refer them as heat waves. And then some areas receiving cold waves, etc. Right. All these we see there. And apart from that, the impact of global warming and climate change is also seen in the oceans. Water bodies or oceans, where we find the acidification of ocean is seen, which are responsible for large amount of death of corals. Acidification of the oceans, etc. So all these are responsible in the context of the losses. Now, when the droughts are there, when the rainfall patterns have been changed, then the forest area becomes completely dry, and the droughts will lead to large amount of forest fires. It will reach to large amount of forest fires. And this we have witnessed in many areas. Uttarakhand forest fire, Bandarghatta forest fires, Australian forest fires, Amazon forest fires, bush fires, etc. So we find many areas where the biodiversity has been lost. So these are referred as some of the factors which are responsible for loss of biodiversities. Right. Now next, we move on to understand something called as mass extinction. The mass extinction, in a very simple term, we say on the earth at any time, whenever 3/4 of the species, 3/4 or 75% of the species, that is both plants and animals, 75% of the species, they become extinct in small time. They become extinct in small time or less time of less than 2.8 million years. Less than 2.8 million years. In very less time of 2.8 million years or lesser than that. We refer that as mass extinction. So it means that when the loss of species is more than what the new species can be formed. New species are formed by evolution. New species are formed by adaptation, genetic diversity. Right. So when the loss of species is more than what the new species can be created, then that will lead to mass extinction. Is that clear? In a very short period of a time. And Earth has already experienced 5 mass extinction. Earth has already experienced 5 mass extinction. We have already experienced 5 mass extinction. Now, at present, there is a debate which is going on. As per the data in 2024, they say that the environmentalists, they say that in the year 2024, we are either in the beginning of the 6th mass extinctions or we are in the mid of 6th mass extinction. I'm repeating. The present scenario, they say that we are either in the beginning of 6th mass extinction, either we are in the beginning of 6th mass extinction, or we are in the midst of 6th mass extinction. Midst of 6th mass extinction. It means we are in the middle of 6th mass extinction. And here they say that This sixth mass extinction is derived. It is due to the man-made factors. The sixth mass extinction, where the anthropogenic factors are major cause. Anthropogenic factors are more. Anthropogenic means man-made factors. Man-made factors are responsible for what we refer them as the sixth mass extinction. Examples are, example of this is, we have created many types of overexploitation of resources, hunting, poaching, degradation, etc. Hunting, poaching, pollution, global warming, climate change, right? And then we talk about something called as overexploitation due to increasing population. That is overexploitation, urbanization, rapid industrialization, etc. So all these are referred as man-made factors which are triggering the sixth mass extinction, right? So because of usage of fossil fuels, we find large amount of global warming and climate change is there, right, which is changing the pattern of rainfall. And hence we say that this sixth mass extinction, either it is in the beginning or in the midst of that. See, when we talk about the mass extinction, the simple definition is that on the earth at any time, whenever 75% of the total plant and animal species, when they become extinct in a span of less than 2.8 million years, so that event is referred as mass extinction. This event is referred as mass extinction. And already the earth has experienced 6 mass extinctions. Already we have experienced 6. So the number of formation of new species will be lesser than what the species are lost, because always there is a continuation, evolution is there. The phase of evolution is less and the phase of extinction is more, and hence the number of species are lost more than which can be evolved. And that phase, which takes place in less than 2.8 million years, is referred as mass extinction, right? So this is what you have to remember. So this can be asked in your current affairs: Anthropocene or sixth mass extinction, which is man-made factors, right? Now we come across something called as international organization, IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature. So we know that all the biodiversities are under threat, all the ecosystems are under threat, and hence we needed an approach to protect them and conserve at international level. So we needed a protection and conservation at international level, right? We needed accountability. We needed somebody who can take care of all the accountabilities, which can help in providing knowledge base, database, support base to protect and conserve the biodiversities in all the part of the earth, including developed countries, developing countries, etc. In this regard, in the year 1948, International Union for Conservation of Nature was set up at headquarter in Gland. Its headquarter is in Gland, that is Switzerland. International Union for Conservation of Nature, right? So when we say epoch, it is a geographical term. Epoch means Earth's age is classified into eons, then epochs, then ages, right? So epoch means it is a time frame which is given to that. International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN. Now here you should remember this, the IUCN which was framed, it is a governing body of protected sites, conservation of sustainable use of natural resources. So please understand that it is a governing body of the protected sites, conservation and sustainable of natural resources. So it means IUCN takes care of protected sites also. IUCN takes care of protected sites also and resources also, that is plants and animals also. So both it takes place, sites plus both plant and animal resources, right? It provides knowledge and tools for conservation and sustainable development. No, don't elaborate this in detail, just make the points. So it provides knowledge, data to concern countries, concern areas, to make sure that the conservation and protection is done in their jurisdiction according to their framework of laws and regulation. It helps the countries to prepare blueprint for protection and conservation. So it means that whatever data which is given by IUCN, all the countries will implement them. All the countries will implement them in their national laws and acts. They implement them in their national laws and acts. Example, in India we are having the laws called as Wildlife Act of 1972, right? So we have many acts where we take the data and use them in implementing legal framework, and based on that every country will create their national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, etc. So countries will create their national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, etc. So they will have a proper protection and conservation of the species here. So this is some rough idea about IUCN. The prominent thing about IUCN is from 1964. From 1964, this IUCN started releasing a list called as Red List. Now this is very important. From 1964, it started releasing a list called as Red List. Now this Red List is referred as barometer of life. It is referred as barometer of life. Right. So this is a most comprehensive list of the state of the present biodiversity on the earth. Comprehensive information of the biodiversity on the earth. So here, Red List do not explain any sites. It is only about the living plants and animals. It talks about the resources, not about the sites. Don't get confused. IUCN talks about sites also, resources also, but the Red List talks only about the state of plants and animals. So hence it is called as barometer of life. Barometer of life. So it is the data which is very, very important to make the mode of conservation in the protection. To make the mode of conservation. Based on the data, the conservations are done. Protections are done to the plants and animal species. Degrees of protection, degrees of conservation is done based on the data which is given by that. So hence it is referred as the critical indicator of the world's biodiversity. Now, this Red List classifies all the plants and animals into 9 major categories. It classifies them into 9 categories. Now, you don't have to buy at all the 9 categories. You don't have to buy at all the 9 categories, right? So the categories, remember, are the species, mostly the plants and animals, which are no more existing. They have already ended up their life. We refer them as extinct category. We refer that as extinct category, which has already ended up. No more species are there. Extinct means no more species are available. No more species are available. We refer that as extinct category. And then we have extinct in wild. So it means that these are the plants and animals which are there, but they are very small in number. They are protected out of their natural habitat. So these extinct in wild. So here the plants and animals are protected out of their natural habitat. They are protected and conservation is done out of their natural habitat. Out of natural habitat. Right. So we refer them as extinct in the wild. Then the 3 categories are there. That is critically endangered, endangered, and vulnerable. Critical endangered, endangered, and vulnerable. So all these are combinedly referred as threatened categories. All these are combinedly referred as threatened categories. So extinct means no more species are available. Extinct in wild, very limited species. They are taken out of their natural habitat and they are protected and conserved in separate setting like botanical gardens, zoos, etc. Right. Then threatened species, they include critically endangered, endangered, and vulnerable. And next is called as near threatened, where if you don't protect them, if you don't conserve them, then these species will become less in the numbers. Less in the numbers. Is that clear? Near threatened. And there are newly found species. There are newly found species where we don't have data about them. We don't have data about them. We refer them as data deficient. Sometimes new species which have been identified, we refer them as data deficient of those. Right. So this is something which you have to remember in the context of your studies. Yes, extinct of Indian cheetah. Right. In 1952, it has been declared extinct. Perfect. Indian cheetah has been declared extinct in the year 1952. So remember this: extinct, extinct in wild, and three major categories which are referred as threatened categories. Now, what are the criteria? What are the criteria to classify that as the threatened categories? Now, there you have to remember the facts. Don't by heart them. UPSC will not ask them in the mains. In prelims, they will be. So the criteria for critically endangered species is if 90% of the population is reduced in 10 years, or less than 50 mature individual populations are there, or probably extinction in the wild at least 50% within the 10 year. So any one condition, if it is shown, then we classify that animal or that plant as critically endangered. In the same way, if we talk about endangered species, 70 to 90% of the population is lost in 10 years, or less than 250 mature individual populations are there, or probability of extinction in the wild is at least 20% within 20 years. Right. In the same way, the vulnerable 50 to 70% of population in the last 10 years has been reduced, or less than 10,000 individuals are there. So these are referred as the threatened categories. Threatened categories. Right. And this red list is released periodically, sometimes once in 2 years. This red list generally is released once in 2 years. Or sometimes it takes long time also. Sometimes when events like COVID were there, so it took long time to release that. Right. So you have to make updations of these lists, which can be seen in the context of current affairs. Right. Now, this is what the 9 terms are. Threatened, least concern. Now, you don't have to by heart all those. Just remember, extinct, no more species are there. Extinct in wild, we protect them and conserve in separate setting. 3 are called as threatened: critically endangered, endangered, and vulnerable. So this you should remember. Now, when you are reading your current affairs, what should be kept in the mind in the context of red list? So here we find thousands of species in the number. Thousands of species will be given. But those species which have changed their categories, compared to previous data, or if any new plant or animal is entering, or any new entry is there. So this you should keep in the mind. Not all the data. Those which have changed their categories, or those which have recently newly entered in the red list from India, or which are of greater cause of concern. So those you should keep in the mind. Not all the thousand or hundreds of the data. Now, if you see the present scenarios, the recent data which was released in the year 2023. So there we find certain changes were introduced. For example, if you talk about big leaf mahogany, so this big leaf mahogany, it changed its category from vulnerable to endangered. It changed its category from vulnerable to endangered. Endangered because of overexploitation. Then we also have this saiga antelope. And this saiga antelope has also been in the news because of changing its category. It changed its category from critically endangered to near threat. Critically endangered to near threatened. Because of large amount of government's approach, international approach in protecting and conserving of that. Then salmo salar, a salmon fish or salmon fish, and this fish has also changed its category from least concern to near threatened. Least concern to near threatened. Near threatened. So always see these things which are there in the current affairs and make the list of these. Right. So this is, yes, the saiga antelope has been worked very well in the last 2 years. The work were there, but last 2 years it has been done significantly workable. Generally in the Asian part where they are found here. Right. So when you find these species in the current affairs, make 3 or 4 points of that. That becomes your potential question for UPSC examination. Right. Then I told some alien species which are always under the threat to the biodiversity. So hence, to understand or to assess the impact of alien species, to assess the impact of alien species on the biodiversity, IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, has created a parameter called as environmental impact clarification of alien taxa. So it is an initiation of IUCN in the year 2020. In the year 2020. Now here it's important because it talks about the impact of the alien species on the environment. And here it classifies all the impact of alien species into 5 impact categories. On the basis of their magnitude and determinant on the ecosystem, on the area where they occur. Is it clear? So please remember this point. And remember, IEICAT is an initiation of IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature. So it is on the basis of their magnitude, whether they are threat or whether they are wiping the entire species in that areas. And it is applied at national level, regional, and global level. These all are facts. Don't elaborate them. Read them, understand them, and put them into the statements. Right. Now these impact categories are referred as the impact categories. 5 impact categories. Wherever less alien species are there, we refer that as minimal concern. It is not like what we have seen in extinct or extinct in the wild. It's not like that. So here we say them as massive, major, and moderate. So the moment when we say massive, it means that it is having major threat of alien species. Highest threat. And minimal concern means lower threat. So 5 impact categories are there. Right. So I have already explained what are alien species. So alien species, I told you, like Prosopis juliflora. I told about cane toad, lanthana, carmara. So all these are referred as alien species. Yesterday itself I told many alien species which have been introduced deliberately or accidentally in the region. Right. So please remember 5 impact categories. Right. So here You don't have to remember these. You don't have to remember these. Minimal concern and massive. So if it is massive, then strong measures should be done to remove the alien species from that ecosystem. Right. Now this is how the objectives are. Identify the taxa at different level. In mains, they will never ask in details. Facilitate the comparison at regional as well as the taxonic groups. Right. Evaluation with different methodologies. So idea is to identify the alien species, check on what degree their impacts are seen presently, and what are the modes or methods in which you can eliminate the impact of the alien species in that area, how you can reduce the impact of alien species. Now in India, we find that around 60% of the natural habitats are covered by alien species, according to the report. According to the report, in India, generally we say more than 60% of the natural systems, they are covered by alien species. Alien species. And more specifically, we are talking about plants. Right. Bubble trees, bunny grasslands, they are referred as alien species, and they are classified into this moderate one. They are classifying into moderate one. Right. Now, biodiversity conservation, how we can protect and conserve them. So generally, when we know about biodiversities and all, now the next one is how to conserve them. There are two modes of biodiversity conservation. Two mode of biodiversity conservation. One is referred as in situ conservation, and second one is ex situ conservation. In situ and ex situ conservation. In situ and ex situ. Now, what is in situ and what is ex situ conservation? So, in the context of in situ, bubble trees, okay. In situ, preserving, protecting, and conserving the endangered species. Preserving, protecting, and conserving endangered species in their natural habitats. Example, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, etc. Biosphere reserves, etc. So we refer them as in situ mode of conservation. In situ mode of conservation, that is in their natural habitats. Now, what is ex situ mode of conservation? So ex situ mode of conservation is where the threatened plants and animals, they are taken out of their natural habitats. And they are protected and conserved in separate setting. We refer them as ex situ part. Example, zoos, botanical garden, right? Botanical garden like Ooty, seed bank, etc. So these are referred as in situ and ex situ mode of conservation. Two ways we protect and conserve that. And in the context of India, we find both. In situ is also there and ex situ is also there. And in the context of India, the in situ are more specifically the national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, and biosphere reserves. Now, if we take the difference between national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, If you see the difference between national parks and the wildlife sanctuaries. Sorry, national park and wildlife sanctuaries. This is national park and this is wildlife sanctuaries. So what is the major difference between them? Wildlife sanctuaries and national parks both are created by an act of parliament. That means that they are created by the government act. Both are created by legislation. Wildlife sanctuary as well as national park, both are created by legislation. Right. Now, differences when we see, human activity is allowed in wildlife sanctuary but not in national park. Human activity is allowed in wildlife sanctuary, but human activity is not allowed in the national park. Not allowed in the national parks. But this human activity should not affect the biodiversity, should not harm the animal species there. Borders. Generally, the wildlife sanctuaries, their borders are not fixed, but the national parks, their boundaries are fixed. Their boundaries are fixed. Whereas the wildlife sanctuaries, their boundaries are not fixed. Their boundaries are not fixed. Not fixed. Ownership. Right. So, in the context of national parks, private ownership is not allowed. Private ownership is not allowed. Not allowed. But in the context of wildlife sanctuaries, private ownership is allowed. It is allowed. It is allowed. And we have any example of that. In the Karnataka, Coorg, we are having the Save Animal Initiative in Karnataka, the wildlife sanctuary. Wildlife sanctuary that is called as Save Animal Initiative in Karnataka. Karnataka in Kodagu district is privately owned. Privately owned. And it is the only privately owned wildlife sanctuary in India. It is the only privately owned wildlife sanctuary in India. SAI, Save Animal Initiative. Save Animal Initiative. Is that clear? Right. Now, when we talk about the national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, in the wildlife sanctuaries, a particular species can be protected. In the wildlife sanctuary, a particular species can be protected. Particular species can be protected or conserved. But in the context of national parks, all species are treated equally. All species are treated equally. It means no particular species are protected. All the species are protected. But in the wildlife sanctuaries, one particular species can be taken and protected in the wildlife sanctuaries. Is that clear? So this is some rough idea. Now we have more than 100 national parks. It is very difficult to remember the national parks. But those national parks which are important, you have to remember. And those which are in the news, you have to remember. The last which have been introduced in Assam, in the state of Assam, the last year, 2 new national parks were there. And these are the Raimona National Park, right? And this Dihing Patkai National Park. So these are the 2 national parks of the Assam which were introduced 2022. And Dihing Patkai is referred as the Amazon of East. Is referred as Amazon of the East. By introducing these 2, by adding these 2 national parks. Now Assam has 7 national parks, 5 plus 2. Assam has totally 7 national parks are there. Raimona, Manas, Orang, Kaziranga, Nameri, Dihang Patkai and Dibru Saikova. So it has totally 7 national parks. So newly added national parks you have to remember in the current affairs. Right, apart from that, Apart from that, you can also have to remember certain national parks, like the largest national park in India. Which is the largest national park, right? So Hemis National Park. Hemis National Park. Now, where is this Hemis National Park? Where is this Hemis National Park? This is in Ladakh, Union Territory of Ladakh. Now, where do you find the national park which is at highest level, the highest national park of India, highest altitude national park of India? Again, it is Hemis National Park, right? So you should be remembering these facts, which are very important for your examination. Then, next we move on to tiger reserves. So, in the context of tiger reserve, when I take Indian part, we will discuss all the tiger reserve. Tiger reserves, they consist of the structure which is having core area, and this core area is completely undisturbed area, which consists of the status of national park or sanctuary. And surrounding this core area, we have the zone which is referred as buffer zone. So tiger reserve consists of two structures: core area, completely undisturbed area according to Wildlife Act of 1972, undisturbed area, and the buffer zone, the peripheral zone. And buffer zone is the region where certain types of agricultural activities are allowed. So it is mixed of forest and non-forest land management. So here we find certain type of agricultural activities are allowed, settlements are allowed in that areas. So tiger reserves, right? Then next is something called as biosphere reserve. Now biosphere reserves, the moment when we say, you have to remember one part. In the year 1968, where the entire earth was having the major concern about biodiversities. So in the year 1968, the biodiversity conference was held, right? So biodiversity or biosphere conference was held. Biodiversity, or we refer that as World Biosphere Conference was held. World Biosphere Conference was held in the year 1968 to analyze the biodiversities of the world, to analyze and assess them. And in this World Biosphere Conference of 1968, it gave rise to a program called as Man and Biosphere Program. The outcome, the outcome of this World Biosphere Conference is Man and Biosphere Program. Man and Biosphere Program of UNESCO, United Nations Program. And this Man and Biosphere Program, it gave a concept of biosphere. It gave a concept of biosphere reserve. Biosphere reserve. Now, the major idea of biosphere reserve is, to protect and conserve the biodiversity. To protect and conserve the biodiversities, right? So here it talks about both type of diversities, genetic as well as cultural biodiversities. Protect and conserve biodiversity, right? Then second one is, if you want to protect and conserve them, you have to make research and study of that. So these biosphere reserves are the areas where research and study is done to protect and make sure that these studies will help them to conserve the resources. Then third one is, they all have to be done by international cooperation. It has to be done by international cooperation. International cooperation. So these are referred as the main characteristics of the biosphere reserve. That is conserving the biodiversity, making studies in that areas, studies, research in that areas, so that they can help in protecting the biodiversities. And also international cooperation, which provides knowledge data, science data, in using them for researches. And this biosphere reserve consists of three rings. It means that it consists of three areas. The central area is referred as core area, which is completely undisturbed area. So this is the definition: Biosphere Reserve, Biosphere Conference, UNESCO's and Man and Biodiversity Program. Facts. Then the biosphere reserves which were created by Man and Biosphere programs, both in the terrestrial as well as aquatic. Terrestrial as well as aquatic. And the mode is in situ type of conservation, protecting the plants and animal species in their own areas. Now, in the biosphere reserve, you have to remember its structure. So the structure of biosphere reserve, it consists of the three rings. We refer them as core area, completely unprotected area, completely protected area according to Wildlife Act. We refer that as core area. Wildlife Act of 1972. Undisturbed area, completely undisturbed area. Right. And surrounding that, we are having a buffer zone. In the buffer zone, research studies are done. In the buffer zone, we always find it is a region where research training is being done. And sometimes in the buffer zone, some settlements are allowed. In the buffer zone, not always. Some settlements are allowed. And then the third ring is called as transition zone. Transition area, this area where human settlements are there, economic activities are also there, which provide sustainable development to these areas. So this is called as the three areas: core area, buffer zone, and transition zone. So please remember, core area, buffer zone, and transition. So in the buffer zone, certain settlements are allowed. Research is done. Training is done. Tourism activities is also allowed in that areas. So this is called as biosphere reserves and its structure. And in India, we are having 18 biosphere reserves. India has 18 biosphere reserves. Right. Now, next, when we talk about the biosphere reserves, a very small important concept is there. We come across something called as World Network of Biosphere Reserves. So what are these World Network of Biosphere Reserves? In the context of biosphere reserve, around the world, we have more than 600 biosphere reserves. In the world, there are more than 600 biosphere reserves are there. Out of that, 18 biosphere reserves are there in India. Right. Now, what is World Network of Biosphere Reserves? In the World Network of Biosphere Reserves, these biosphere reserves, they perform the activity of protection and conservation. Plus, they also perform sustainable development of the area in lines with sustainable development goals. So there are 17 goals which are there. 17 goals. In your social issues, you might have studied that. Sustainable development goals. 17 goals. Apart from that, they also provide cultural activities or social activities. They also perform social or cultural support. So such types of the biosphere reserves, we refer them as World Network of Biosphere Reserves, which are along with the lines of sustainable development goals, and they are also providing cultural aspects, sustainability aspects, economic aspects in that area. So in the context of India, out of 18 biosphere reserves, now try to find out how many are referred as the World Network of Biosphere Reserves. In India, out of 18, how many biosphere reserves are classified as the World Network of Biosphere Reserve? Right. And the last edition was Panna Biosphere Reserve. Perfect. Panna was added, right? So out of 18, 12 are referred as the World Network of Biosphere from India. Panna in Madhya Pradesh. Is it clear? So these are the facts which you should remember. Facts, keep them in the mind. Everything has to be there in your fingertips, because UPSC, when we say prelims, 60 to 70% of the environmental questions will be facts. It's a mind game. It's a memory game in UPSC, right? Then CITES, Conventions on International Trade and Endangered Species. Now here, understand a small perspectives. We come across a term called as convention. We come across a term called as convention, right? Then we come across something called as conference of parties. Conference of parties, or COP. COP. Now, what is convention and what is conference of parties? Now, convention means that in the international meeting, where 10 countries, 20 countries, right? 4 countries, so many countries, more than two countries, when they meet, discuss, and negotiate. When they meet, discuss, and negotiate. Important agenda. Example, like labor issue, global warming issue, or climate change issue, or biodiversity issue. So these issues which are discussed in the international meeting, so these are referred as the points which are discussed, we refer them as conventions. So the points or the details which are discussed, we refer them as conventions. Right? And once they discuss that, the countries will negotiate. They will discuss them, and then the countries which are joined. Not all the countries. It is not mandatory. Out of that, certain countries, they will sign them. They will endorse them. We refer them as signatories. We sign, endorse them. We refer them as signatories. And the moment when they sign, it is not legally binding. The countries which have signed, for them it is not legally binding. Not all the conventions are legally binding to the signatories, not legally binding. So we refer them as signatories. The countries which have signed them, we refer them as signatories. Now, what these countries are? So these countries which are signatories, they are referred as the governing bodies to the conventions. They are referred as the governing body to particular convention. Governing body to the particular convention. And these governing bodies, they meet periodically. To discuss the strategies. And how they have to go ahead. To discuss the strategy and how they have to go. So this periodic meeting is referred as conference of parties. This periodic meeting is referred as conference of parties to the convention. So there are many conventions which meet every year. There are many conventions which meet once in 2 years. And there are many conventions which meet once in 3 years. Right? Example, we come across United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It meets every year. Conference of parties will be held. So when I take global warming and climate change, I'll explain this in detail. United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So this is what you have to remember: convention and conference of parties. Conventions means international agenda which are discussed and negotiated, and many countries participate in that, and those countries which have signed that, we refer them as the signatories to that convention. And these signatories which have endorsed them, they meet periodically to discuss the progress of the convention, discuss what strategies they should take for next part. And that is where, when they meet, we refer that as conference of parties. And the number says what number they are meeting. If they are meeting for the first time, then it will be COP1. If they are meeting for 28th time, then we say it is COP28. If they are meeting for the 10th time, we refer that as COP10. Is it clear? So we refer that as convention and their parties. Now, convention is original thing which is seen in that. Now, sometimes these conventions are also amended. We bring some changes, like in the context of India, an act is there. Now, when you want to introduce some change in the act, we refer that as amendment. Amendment. Now, in the same way, these conventions can also be amended. And one of the way in which the amendment is done to these conventions, we refer them as protocols. They can be amended by a term called as protocols. Protocols, right? So amendment, changes which have been introduced. So protocol means it defines the changes and also how the act has implemented, how we have to implement. Protocol means the duties it has to be done. So one of the way in which the convention can be amended is through protocols. So through protocols we amend the convention. So please remember these terms: convention, protocol, and conference of parties, which meet in the context of their part every year, 2 years or 3 years, right? So this is what the conventions, and already we have read about Ramsar convention. Now the second convention what we are discussing is referred as the CITES. We refer that as CITES, that is Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. Now the moment when you talk about this, there is a large amount of illegal trade or illegal trafficking of the endangered species are there. Illegal trade or smuggling of endangered species are there. Example, pangolin for its medicinal values, like turtles, etc. So illegal trade and smuggling of many species are there which are endangered, and there is a threat for their survival. If continuously smuggling is done, then they become a major cause of concern. Their number will become less. So in this context, when they do the smuggling of these illegal trade is there, so due to the selling of that, it raises large amount of money. So this raises huge money. Huge money is involved in such types of illegal trade or smuggling. And this huge money which is involved in that can lead to organized crime. Organized crime. Like this money which is raised here can be used for funding terrorist activities. Or it can be used in money laundering case. Money laundering. Right. So because of that, in the international approach, it was decided that as this is threat for both activities, it is threat for the plants and animal species, and it is also creating organized crime. So hence we need to curb that, and hence it was decided in the year 1971 that, sorry, in the year 1975, that an international agreement has to be required. Between the centers and the institutions. to curb the illegal trafficking, illegal trade of species endangered species. And we refer that as Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. And it ensures that CITES is implemented at national level by framework. Now here you should remember that the CITES is legally binding on the states. The CITES is legally binding on the states. Legally binding on the states. It means that those countries which have signed that, which have ratified that, they have to implement that in their national laws. Right. So hence it ensures CITES is implemented at national level of framework. So it means that this CITES is not self-executing. It is not self-executing. CITES is not self-executing. It cannot be executed directly by the international organization. It has to be implemented through the national laws. It has to be implemented through the national framework. It has to be implemented through the national laws. National laws. That's why we have amended the Wildlife Act of 1972. We have amended the Wildlife Act of 1972 to introduce the CITES. We have amended the Wildlife Act of 1972 to introduce this, right? So this is some rough idea. Now, in this CITES, we have classified the species into three appendices. The first one is the species which are both threatened with extinctions or may be affected by the trade. So you need to protect them and control. If not, then they become major threat. The second one is Appendix 2, the species which may become threat unless and until it is not regulated. Then Appendix 3, species which are protected at least in one country. So three types of appendix are there: Appendix 1, Appendix 2, and Appendix 3. If any species enters into this appendix, then you have to make the data of that, the species which have entered there in these appendixes. Now you don't have to buy it all the numbers, but recently where it has been framed out, right? Now the countries which have signed the CITES, we refer them as the governing bodies of that, and they meet once in every 3 years. So they meet once in 3 years. Once in 3 years. Right. And the last meeting was 19th time. COP 19 means they met 19th time. 19th time. And this meeting was in Costa Rica. Now here, the important outcome was that 2 Indian turtle species were placed under Appendix 1. This you should keep in the mind. 2 Indian turtle species were placed in the Appendix 1. That is red-crowned roof turtle or Batugar kachuga, this one. And then Lethes soft shell turtle, Nenson. So these are the 2 which have been included in the Appendix 1. And second one is the Shisham, which was placed under Appendix 1. It has been reduced to Appendix 2. So it has reduced to Appendix 2 from Appendix 1. So by that, it has created huge relief to handicraft industries. So by putting that into Appendix 2, it has given huge relief to handicraft industries. Because this sesamum is used in creating many decorative chairs or many such things which are used in puja, etc. So if it is in the Appendix 1, then limited amount of export is allowed. If it is Appendix 1, then limited volume of export is allowed. The moment when you have reduced that to Appendix 2, it means that more exports can be done. So that means that it has given huge relief to this handicraft industries in the context of India. So such data you should keep in the mind. And also in the COP19, it was also discussed that we should reduce the zoonotic disease, reduce the risk of zoonotic disease, reduce risk of zoonotic disease. What is zoonotic disease? Can anybody tell what is zoonotic disease? It was also decided to reduce the which transfer from animals to men. Any example of zoonotic disease? Any example of zoonotic disease? See here, Appendix 1 is considered as more concern there, right? Nipah virus, etc. Nipah virus, perfect. You don't have to make in-depth analysis. In your SNT, you might have already studied. Now, when you're talking about that, yes, rabies and all, bird flu, all are there. The most trafficked animal in the world is pangolin. Pangolin is most trafficked animal. Most trafficked animal. It is trafficked for medicinal values. Medicinal values, right? And here we come across the pangolins which are there. And out of that, two pangolins are in India. Two pangolins are India. And these are the Chinese pangolin, which is critically endangered. Critically endangered. Then Indian pangolin, which is endangered one. Indian pangolin, which is in the category of endangered. Endangered. So don't get much confused about that, right? So out of these pangolins, Chinese pangolin is critically endangered, whereas Indian pangolin is endangered. Endangered one. You don't have to go with A plus D and all. Just remember them. Is that clear? Pangolins, most trafficked animal in the world. Now, next we move on to CMS, Convention on Conservation of Migratory Species. Now, what is this Convention on Migratory Species? It is also called as Bonn Convention, as it was signed in Germany. So we refer that as Bonn Convention. It is also referred as endemic, means it is native to that area. Native to that areas, right? So it is an international and intergovernmental treaty which is backed by United Nations Environment Program. What is this CMS talks about? So generally when we talk about CMS, you should remember that it is concerned with the migratory species. It is concerned with the migratory species. That is birds and animals. Birds and animals. Migratory species, right? So these migratory species, when they move from their source to destination, when they move from their source to destination, and this they always move voluntary. It is not forcible, it is voluntary. Voluntary. So these migratory species, they move from their source to the destination, either through air or through water or on the land area, from the source to the destinations. So from the source up to the destinations, they need to be protected. They need to be protected. And for that CMS is being signed. Conservation of migratory species. So generally, what type of threats they face? So threats associated with them is electric wires, electrocation, high tension wires, electrocation, high tension wires, polluted waters, towers, right? Accidents in the journeys, then light pollution, etc. So such types of threats will be there. Such types of threats will be there, and you need to protect these species, which they always move from one area to another area. So most of the species, generally we say birds, we come across them, birds. And these birds, they generally move from one area to another area, which we refer that as annual migratory cycle. Birds, they always move in their cycle. We refer them as annual migratory cycle. Annual migratory cycle. Now they use different methodologies like geomagnetism, Earth's magnetic field they use to locate them. Certain dolphins, they use the echolocation to identify the places. Earth's magnetic field is used by them. So different methodologies they use. Magnetic field, very important for locating. In your geography, you have studied that. Earth's magnetic field is used by migratory species to locate their destinations. So these annual migratory cycle of the birds are there. So generally they visit from one area to another region for breeding, nesting, and also molting. Also molting. Molting means shedding their feathers, shedding their skin. Molting means shedding their skins. Now these birds, when they move from one place to another, they travel countries together, and generally they have identified that they are referred as flyways. Birds have flyways, international flyways, and they have identified there are 9 international flyways. 9 international flyways, and out of these 9 international flyways, 3 passes through India. 3 flyways passes through India, right? And hence, they have to be protected at all the cases. Towers, mobile towers, electric towers, etc., and light pollution. Light pollution. So due to light pollution, they change their directions. They miss their nesting places. Whenever lights are there, generally when we use large amount of high intensity lights, they presume them to be day, and by that they miss their locations. So light pollution has become major threat now. This light pollution has become major threat, where they are deviating from their nesting places. They are wandering in that areas where they come under the impact of some prey. They miss their places. So light pollution has become major problem for the migratory species like turtles, birds. When the light intensities are very high during the night, they miss their places because they presume it to be not there. They have different sensors to locate that regions. So hence we refer them as threats. Yes, windmills and all these towers, we refer them as the threats. So this you should keep in the mind. So migratory species of the birds and their problems associated with that. So or any type of any type of birds and animals, when they move from their source to the destination, they need to be protected from source till their destination, on air, on water, and also on the land. And for that we have signed something called as conservation of migratory species, or CMS. CMS, conservation of migratory species, right? It is also called as Bonn Convention. Idea is to build and strengthen the global conservation to effort the birds or migratory animals from land, air, and also on the water. Now here it classifies them into two appendix. Appendix means categories. It has classified all the migratory birds and animals into two categories, right? So they may ask about the migratory species if they are in the current affairs. Appendix 1 talks about the species that threatened with the extinction if you don't protect. Then appendix 2 talks about the species that need more amount of protection, right? So these are the two types of appendix, or the categories of the birds and animals, which you find in the CMS, right? So Convention on Conservation of Migratory Species, right? So please keep this format in the mind. So it is voluntary, not forcible. It is voluntary. And flyways, which are always in the news. So if they are always repeating, You should remember them in the part. Is that clear? Okay. Now, the countries which have signed, we refer them as conference of parties. The countries which have signed, and when they meet, we refer that as conference of parties. And when we talk about the conference of parties, so these also meet once in every year. So meet once in every 3 years. Once in every 3 years. Right. So first, second conventions are not required. You have to just understand the present scenarios. So here you should remember COP13 was held in India. COP13 was held in India, and COP14 was held in Samarkand in the year 2024. And this is the theme of that. Nature knows no borders, right? So COP13 was held in India, where we highlighted the protection and conservation of great Indian bustard, where we made an effort to protect and conserve the great Indian bustard, right? So in the COP14, they highlighted two important things. One is that protect the migratory animals, birds, from light pollution, which has increased over a period of a time. Light pollution, which was a major determinant threat to that. And third one is to protect the international flyways, to protect and conserve. More dedication to international birds flyways. International birds flyways. Right. So remember that. Remember here. Right. So here we come across the international bird flyways. 9s were there. 9 are there. Out of that, 3 are in India. 3 are in India. Is it clear? Now, what are the important outcomes of COP14 CMS? Important outcomes are: it urged the parties to take action to mitigate and adapt the climate change, to consider the impact, because due to climate change, they found large amount of the species were lost because of droughts leading to forest fires and changing of the precipitation patterns. Changing of the precipitation patterns. So you should take concern of climate change, the wind patterns, the rain patterns, then also the droughts which are affecting the migratory species. Then it also talks about the Samarkand strategic plans for migratory species for 8 years, from 2024 to 2032. A plan which requires to protect them. They are not completely explained what type of strategies. They have just said that we need to develop a plan. So maybe in another 2 or 3 months, they may come out with the plan here. They assessed new initiative on Central Asian flyways, and this Central Asian flyway is one of the 3 flyways which passes through India. I told that 3 flyways are there which are passing from India. Out of that, Central Asian flyway is very important one. Very important one. And apart from that, new global guidelines were introduced to curb the light pollution on the migratory species, right? And they also adapted to list 14 migratory species to make their conservation, to provide them conservation. It means they introduced into Appendix 1 and Appendix 2, right? And the 3 new action plans were taken. 3 new action plans were taken, right, for aquatic humpback, turtle, and angel shark. So please remember these part, right? And during that, it also released a report called as a Report on Migratory Species. So first ever report was released. First ever report on migratory species was released, right? Non-migratory species was released, and I have discussed that in the webinar. So in the webinar, you will get this report of migratory species. Already it has been done in the last month's webinar. last month's webinar. So this is a COP 14 CMS, right? So don't make in-depth analysis of that. Just keep them, the facts, in your fingertips, right? Now, convention on biological diversity. Now, the moment when you talk about convention on biological diversity, you should remember that this convention on biological diversity, CBD, was the outcome of Earth Summit. It is the result of Earth Summit, Earth Summit, or it is also referred as Rio Summit, Rio Summit of 1992. So when I take global warming and climate change, I'll explain that in detail, right? So global warming and climate change, I'll explain that in detail. See, when we talk about COP, every conference has their own meeting. I told you that these conferences, they meet periodically. So in the context of COP 14, they meet once in 3 years. UNFCCC is a different one. UNFCCC meets every year. COP for CMS meets once in a year. Please understand this. I told you that they meet either once in a year or they meet once in 3 years. UNFCCC of COP is different. Those countries which have signed UNFCCC, they are referred as Conference of Parties of UNFCCC. Those countries which have signed CMS, they are referred as Conference of Parties. Right? Don't get much confused, Bhimrai. Every convention will have their own COPs. Don't get confused. Every convention will have their own types of their COPs. Every convention. See, when you talk about labor laws, so labor laws, countries which are signed as different. Child marriage, they are different. So every country will have their own perspectives. So hence, every conferences are based on their signatories. Is that clear? Okay. So every convention will have its own separate conference of parties. Is it clear? Okay. Now, next we move on to CBD, Convention on Biological Diversities. So this Convention on Biological Diversity is an outcome of 1992. So in the year 1992, three conventions were signed. I'll discuss that when I take global warming and climate change. Out of these three conventions, the one convention is referred as the Convention on Biological Diversities. The other two conventions are United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, United Nations Convention on Combating Desertification. So these two I'll discuss when I take global warming and climate change. These two I'll discuss. So COP which have signed CBDs are different. COPs of UNFCCs are different. COPs of UNCC are different. Is it clear? UNFCCC, they meet every year. UNCCD, they meet once in 2 years. And when we talk about CBD, they meet once in 2 years. Is it clear? So the CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity, it is very flexible and comprehensive binding agreement. And the objective is to conserve the biological diversity, sustainable use of components of biological diversity. So what is biological diversity? The plants, varieties of the plants, the foods, the fruits, the animals, their products, we refer them as biological diversities, right? So sustainable use of components of biodiversities, the foods, the medicines which are created by them, their crops, all these are referred as the components of biodiversity. Fair and equitable sharing up of benefits arising out of genetic resources. So genetic resources, the moment when we say, so these are nothing but genetic material of, these are referred as genetic material. Genetic material, right? So these genetic materials, generally they are of the plants, animals, etc., which are used in medicinal values, which are used in treating many types of crops issues. So we refer them as genetic resources. Is it clear? So fair and equitable sharing up of benefits. So please remember this. Now, in this Convention of Biological Diversities, they have introduced two changes. They have made some two changes in that. Now, what is the way in which the changes have to be introduced? We refer them as protocols. protocols. So two protocols were introduced to CBD, and these are referred as the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety and Nagoya Protocol. So always remember, the CBD has two protocols. Two protocols. Changes. One is in the context of biotechnology, we refer that as genetics, right? So in the context of biotechnology, which has been introduced, right? So we deliberately make the modification in the plants and animals, and then we create transgenic plants and transgenic animals, genetic engineering, biotechnology or genetic engineer. So by using that, we create transgenic plants and animals, transgenic plants and animals. And these transgenic plants and animals, the living animals which are modified genetically, living plants which are modified genetically, we refer them as living modified organisms. LMO means living modified organism. Living modified organism. And the movement of these living modified organism has to be protected. Now, to protect this living modified organism at international level, we made a protocol called as Cartagena Protocol in Colombo. It was signed in Colombo to make sure that the movement of living modified organism which are arising out of biotechnology is concerned. And it was adopted on January 2000 and entered into force in 2003. So please remember, Cartagena Protocol talks about the safe movement of living modified organisms. Safe movement of living modified organism at international level. That is sufficient. The Nagoya Protocol. Nagoya Protocol talks about access to the genetic resources and their fair benefit. Genetic resources means we talk about the genetic materials which are arising out of that. Genetic material which are arised out of the plants, animals. See, here we are talking not only about the plants and animals, sometimes microorganisms also. Plants, animals, and microorganisms. Microorganisms. Right. So genetic materials of plants, animals, and microorganisms. So they are used in many parts, like they are used in medicines. Their applications are used in medicines. They are used in agriculture. They are used in industry, etc. Their applications are used. Their applications are used in industries, medicines, etc. Like creating medicine for disease resistance, etc. Right? Like any type of fungal disease, viral disease. For that, resistance is being created, and for that we need a genetic resources, and hence these genetic resources, they are prominent in the present part because of the development in the biotechnology, where every time we are creating new medicines or new methodology to protect the crops, to protect the animals, or to have a safe living in the context of many disease aspects here. And hence these genetic resources plays an important role, and hence Nagoya Protocol talks about benefits should be shared equitably. This benefit should be shared equitably among the users as well as the providers. It should be transparent, those who provide them and also who are using them. So we refer that as Nagoya Protocol. So it is benefit sharing from the genetic resources. And this Nagoya Protocol was signed in the Nagoya of Japan. Is it clear? And it was adopted in October 10 and entered into force into 2014. Right. Now, this is what you should remember. So Great Indian bustards, yes, they are migratory species. They move from one to another areas. They move from one. Great Indian bustard, Bengal foreign, right? So they are migratory species. They migrate from one area to another areas. Then COP15 CBD. No, remember, the 15th, the conference of parties which have signed the CBD, we refer them as conference of parties. We refer them as the conference of parties of CBD. Is it clear? Now, here they meet once in 2 years. They meet once in 2 years. Right. Now, the meeting was to be held in 2020. It was postponed due to COVID. It was postponed due to COVID. And later it was held. A year later, it was held in two parts. It was held in two parts. Into two parts. The first part was held in Kunming. The first part was held in Kunming. And the second part was held in Canada. Second part was held in Canada. So we refer that as Conference of Parties of CBD 2022 into two parts. Is that clear? Now, migratory means when they are moving from one place to another. I'm not talking about international migration. I'm talking about migration. Migration means leaving that place. So in geography, when we say migrations, international migrations means when you are moving from one place to another place. Don't get much confused there, right? So this is CBD, COP15 CBD, right? Now, what are the important outcomes of that? As it was joint declaration of Kunming as well as the Canada. So it is referred as Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework was created. And this Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework, it talks about certain goals, four goals to be achieved by 2050. And it also talks about certain targets which has to be attained. So it talks about 23 targets to be attained by 2030. So it talks about four goals. So what are the four goals? Conserve and restore the biodiversity, ensure sustainable use of biodiversity, right? Benefits and all. So these have to be achieved by 2050. It talks about 30 by 30 target. So what does this 30 by 30 target says? The 30 by 30 target, it says that restoring 30% of degraded, restoring 30% of degraded ecosystems, right? So restoring 30% of degraded ecosystems by 2030. And second aspect of this, it says that we are to bring 30% of land and water as protected areas, to bring 30% of land and water as protected areas by 2030, right? Then next it says that reduce the risk of pesticides by at least 50% by 2030. Pesticides are something which are killing large amount of the species, because pesticides are selective. They are selective. Then tackle the climate change through nature based solution, like planting trees instead of constructing large types of frontiers. So nature based solution like afforestation or planting trees, etc., or restoring the lakes, ponds, etc., restoring of the lakes, ponds, lakes, etc. Yes. So the recent COP's statements has to be kept. They will ask in the prelims, right? Then secure safe, legal, sustainable use of trade of all species by 2030, right? So these points you should remember. These points you should remember in the context of our examination, right? So goals and targets. So when we say goals are long terms. Goals are long terms. Targets means you have to reach them in very faster modes, right? So you have to work out very fast in the context of the targets. Long term goals are there. Targets means shorter perspectives. Shorter perspectives. Is it clear? And for that, they created a Kunming Biodiversity Fund also. Kunming Biodiversity Fund was also created, where China said that it will provide, China said that it will provide $233 million to the developing countries for protection and conservation of biodiversity. Developing countries for protecting the biodiversity. Is that clear? So this is called as the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Is that clear? Now, HE targets. These HE targets were there from 2011 to 20. Now, these IT targets were replaced by Kunming Montreal Biodiversity Framework. So, IT targets have been replaced by this Kunming Montreal Biodiversity Framework. Right, and they consist of goals to be reached by 2050 and targets to be reached by 2030. Right, so remember this. So IG targets, you don't have to remember, just understand IG targets consist of 5 goals and 20 targets, and none of the targets were reached, none of the targets were achieved, none of the targets were achieved. Right, and here the same thing: address the loss of biodiversity, reduce the direct pressure on biodiversities, and safeguard the ecosystems. Biodiversity benefits to all. So these all are referred as HE targets. Now HE targets is replaced by the Kunming Montreal Biodiversity Framework. So please keep this in the mind. Please keep this in the mind. China itself is developing country. I never told that China is developed country. I told China has made a fund, and that fund it will be giving only to the developing countries. Right. So here I never mentioned that China is a developed country. I told that China has said that it will provide $233 million for the developing countries, not for the developed countries. Is that clear? Now, previous year's questions were there. One is, which one of the following national park lies completely in the temperate alpine zone? So such types of questions can be asked. Temperate alpine zone. Now, the moment when we say temperate alpine zone, so you should be knowing certain geographical aspect. Temperate means it should be north of the Tropic of Cancer. When you talk about India, the Tropic of Cancer divides the India into two parts, south and north. So it means it should be in the northern side. It should be in the northern side. Alpine means at higher altitude. Alpine means at higher altitude. Now here when we talk about that, right, so we come across these many national parks, but the one which is very much systematically covered under this in the current affairs was that it is the Valley of Flowers in the Uttarakhand, which was in the news at that time. Which was in the news. Valley of Flowers, which was in the news. Simple to be answered. Then, which one of the following are in the Augustamalai Biosphere Reserves? Now, here, please understand, sometimes when they ask any biosphere reserves, so biosphere reserves will have protected areas in their core, and then transition, buffer zone. So here they may ask which are the protected areas in the core regions. Right. So if it is in the news, you don't have to buy it about all the 18. If any biosphere reserve is in the news, if it is in the news, then we refer them as, then they will be important into your current affairs. Right. So here, this Agastya Biosphere Reserve was in the news at that time when the question was asked. And here it is about the four things, that is Niyar, Pepara, Shendurai, and all those. So these were the something which were used in the datas, right? So if you see the map, so here you will find that Augustamalai Biosphere Reserve. And Augustamalai Biosphere was in the news at that time when it got the status of World Network of Biosphere Reserves here. World Network of Biosphere Reserves here, right? Then, in which one of the following state is Pakui Wildlife Sanctuary is there? Again, it was in the news. Pakui Wildlife Sanctuary, which was in the news. And this is again you will find in the state of Arunachal Pradesh. Right. in the state of Arunachal Pradesh. Is it clear? So such questions you will get in your current affairs. Now the idea is not about answering. Idea is to analyze that what type of questions are asked. Idea is not about answering the previous year's questions. Idea is to understand that what way the questions are asked, what way the questions are framed, how you should develop the strength in analyzing and answering that. Is it clear? Then consider the following statement. Most of the world, so here poll does not, I'll take it poll, I can make a poll from next class itself, but understand the idea. Rather than answering, understand that what way the questions have been framed out, what type of statements they are talking about. Now consider the statements. Most of the world's coral reefs are in the tropical waters. Then more than one third of the coral reefs are located in the territories of Australia, Indonesia, and Philippines. Then coral reefs host more than number of animal phyla which are hosted by the tropical rainforest. Now, if you see the questions, here, it's not about answering which is correct. You should analyze that what type of questions are asked here. Now, if we take the first one, most of the world's coral reefs are found in the tropical waters. So there will be no problem in answering that, because the corals are referred as tropical areas, right? So there won't be any problem with that. Then more than one third of the coral reefs are found in the territories of Australia and Indonesia. I told you that 30% you find in this area and 30% you will find in this area. Now, coral reefs hosts far more number of animal phyla than that hosted in the tropical rainforest. Now, if you see this question, and the statement, coral reefs host far more number of animal phyla than those hosted by tropical rainforest. Now, if you remove animal phyla, from here, from this statement, then the entire statement becomes wrong. So hence you should be careful about the words. Which are used here, right? So coral reefs hosts far more number of animal phyla than those hosted by the tropical rainforest. Now here he is talking about animal phyla. So animal phyla means, yes, it is having more amount of animal phyla. If you remove the animal phyla, then the third statement will be wrong. If you remove animal phyla, then the statement will be wrong, because tropical rainforest are those which consist of more amount of the species of plants there, right? So here you should be very careful about the words. Coral reefs host more. So the moment when they added animal, then the third statement is also correct. The moment when they added the third statement, then it is correct, because here he is talking about more amount of animal species. He is not talking about general biodiversity. He's talking about animals, because in the reefs, the skeletons of the reefs, they will be having large amount of insects, large amount of fish. So they host more amount of animal phyla than the tropical rainforest. In the tropical rainforest, they will be having more amount of plants. The tropical rainforest, they will be having more amount of plants, and coral reefs will have more amount of animal phyla. Tropical rainforest will have more amount of plant phyla, because there we find shrubs are there, trees are there. If you take Amazon forest, in the Amazon forest we find more amount of trees rather than animals. So that is the meaning of the statement. Is that clear? So you should be very careful. You should select the words. You should understand the words. Then only you can mark it very correctly. Is it clear now? The tropical rainforest, Amazon forest, will be having more amount of trees. Whereas the Great Barrier Reef, do we have plants more there or animals more here? So in the Great Barrier Reef, we find more amount of insects, animals, phyla, which will be more here, right? So hence, all the three statements are correct here, because of only one term called as animal phyla, right? Then consider the following statement. Biodiversity is normally greater in the lower latitudes as compared to the higher latitudes. Among the mountain gradients, biodiversity is normally greater at lower altitude as compared to the higher altitudes. This is very simple one. Very simple one. If you take the facts, here. So here, at the lower latitude and lower altitude. Lower latitude means at the equator, and lower altitude means at the foothills. So hence, both the statements are correct here. Right? Then which of the following phenomenons might have influenced the evolution of organism. Might have. So here you need to understand your geography part and also the environmental concern. Environmental concern. Now, which one of the following are associated with the evolution of organism? I have explained about continental drift theory. I've explained about continental drift theory and how it responsible. Then Earth also had entered many glacial cycles. So we have already experienced glacial cycles as well, which you are dead your geography. So both the statements are correct here. Glacial, interglacial ones. Right. Then, if a wetland of international importance is brought under Montrac's record, what does it imply? Montrac's record. It's a simple statement. In India, we are having two wetlands which are referred as Montrac's records. Now, you have to read and mark which is correct here. In India, out of 80 Ramsar wetlands, two are referred as Montrac's records. Right. So, the moment when it is there in the Montrac's record, what does it mean? Which statement will be appropriate in this, in the context of the wetlands, right? Which is Montrac's record. So here, if you see wetlands, I told that change in the ecological characteristics have occurred, occurring, or likely to occur. We refer that as the Montrac's record. This is what I discussed 15 to 20 minutes in the yesterday's class. Right, two wetlands in India are referred as Montrac's record. Right. The red data book published by IUCN contains the list. Very careful. Red data book. Endemic plants and animal species present in the biodiversity hotspots, threatened plants and animal species, protected sites for conservation of nature and natural resources in the various countries. Various countries. Right. Now here when we talk about the red data book published in IUCN contains, it does not talks about only endemic, it talks about all the plants. Endemic means native. So it talks about all that, not only endemic, all the plants and animal species. So this statement is wrong. It talks about the threatened plants and animal species. 9 categories are there. 9 categories will be there, right? So it is correct. Then protects the sites of conservation of nature and natural resources. So it does not talks about the sites. Sites is taken by IUCN, not by red data, not by red data. So hence only second statement is correct. So you should be very, very selective in your statements. Right. With reference to India's desert national park, again it was asked when it was in the current affairs and when India hosted the conference of parties. Which of the following statement is correct? It is spread, sometimes they will ask the questions. It is spread in districts wise. So such factual data are asked. Right. So it is spread in two districts, that is Jaisalmer and Barmer. And Jaisalmer, it is always seen because of high electrotension wires there. Right. Then it talks about there is no human habitation inside the park. But here we find certain human habitations are there, certain communities which are there. So the statement is wrong. It is one of the natural habitats of great Indian bustard. Yes, you find that. So statement 1 and 3 are correct here. Now here it is not about answering right or wrong. Here it is about knowing that there are certain human settlements which are allowed in the national parks. Certain human settlements are allowed who are staying there since from long time. Right. Among the following tiger reserves, which one has the largest critical tiger habitat? Again, which was asked based on the current affairs. Tiger census which were given at that time. Now again the tiger census were released. Again the tiger census were released. Right. Now this was asked because in spite of the largest habitat, the number of tigers were reduced in that. Number of tigers were reduced in that according to the census. According to the census. So it is Nagarjuna Srisailam. Nagarjuna Srisailam. Right. So where in spite of a large area, it is bigger than the Sundarban Tiger Reserve. It is bigger than Sundarban Tiger Reserve, but still the number of tiger species reduced here. So that's why that question was asked. Right. Now these are the practice questions you practice after the class. Now you can have a break. Then we will start the class at 7:10, where I'll take up facts about Indian part. We'll start the class at 7:10. So in the next 1.5 hours, facts will be there about India's biodiversity. So welcome back to the classes. So hope I am audible as well as visible to you all, right? So now we'll try to understand the facts associated with the biodiversity of India. Here you will find more amount of facts and certain few concept associated with the whatever we have done here. Now if you take India, certain aspect, India is seventh largest country in area, seventh largest in area, right? Second, India is in the northern hemisphere. India is located in the northern hemisphere. And then if you take India, we find the presence of Himalayas. The presence of Himalayas is very important in the context of India. This Himalayan mountain, which act as a barrier for the cold winds to enter into India, and hence this Himalayas provides tropical climate to India. Because of the presence of Himalaya, we have tropical climatic conditions are there, right? Then this Tropic of Cancer divides India into two parts. Tropic of Cancer divides India into two parts. And India has a long coastline of 7,516 kilometers. And India is having many types of landforms. India has diverse landforms. Like India has mountain, India has valleys, India has deserts, India has grasslands, etc. So we have valleys are there, deserts are there, grasslands are there. So all types of lands are there. And apart from that, India receives the rainfall in the form of periodic reversal called as monsoon. Monsoon, periodic rainfalls are there. Monsoons which are there. So hence seventh largest area, Tropic of Cancer, and all these geographical constraints or geographical positive perspectives, which is blessed with the mountains, plateaus, and etc. India is very rich in biodiversity. Because of all these things, India is rich in biodiversity. Rich in biodiversity. It is geologically very complex also. If you see the geological complexity, this part, which is called as peninsular part, is the oldest part of India. And Indian plate, when it collided with the Eurasian plateau, then it created when it made an collision with the Eurasian plate subduction, that created Himalaya. So geologically it is youngest one. So one is oldest part and one is the youngest one. So geologically also it is very complex. It is very complex in geologically. And if you see the India's, as it is rich in biodiversities, India shares two biogeographical realms of the world. India shares two biogeographical realms of the world. And I have explained that while defining the biogeographical realms. And India has four biodiversity hotspots. India has four biodiversity hotspots of the world. Out of 36, four biodiversity hotspots are there. So hence India is tremendously rich in biodiversity. And India is also one of the 17 mega biodiverse countries of the world. India is also one among the 17 mega biodiverse country of the world. Mega biodiverse country of the world. Right. So hence it is, yes, Palearctic and Indo-Malayan. Perfect. So those are the two biogeographical rims. So this you should always keep in the mind when you're writing answers in the context of introduction. And because of all these types of characteristics, we find many species are there which are endemic to India. Many plants and animal species which are endemic to India, that is native to India, which evolved in India, which have evolved in India over a period of a time. Evolved over a period of a time. Now, if you see the endemism of India, endemism means native. We find 12% of mammals are endemic. native to India. Endemism means native. And 55% of amphibians are native to India. And then 4.5% of the birds, reptiles, plants, which are referred as native to India. So India is very rich in biodiversity, right? And if you take their protected areas, more than 100 national parks are there, 500 plus wildlife sanctuaries are there, 18 biosphere reserves are there, which protects these species. So please keep this in the mind. 100 plus natural parks, 500 plus wildlife sanctuaries. You don't have to remember exact data, right? 18 biosphere reserves are there. So this means that India is a country where it provides more protection and conservation to the biodiversities. Is it clear? So this you should always keep in the mind when you're writing your answers. But when you talk about Indian parts, factual data, in the context of India, we have 18 biosphere reserves. You don't have to buy at all the 18 biosphere reserves. But if any biosphere reserve is in the news, then you have to make data of that. And these 18 biosphere reserves are, if you find them from the northern side, in the Himachal Pradesh, we are having a cold desert. In Uttarakhand, Nanda Devi. Uttarakhand in Nanda Devi. Now, when you move on to the eastern side, we have Kanchenjunga in Sikkim. Kanchenjunga in Sikkim. Then, when you move on to the Seven Sisters, eastern side, then we are having Dihang Dibang in Arunachal Pradesh. Dihang Dibang in Arunachal Pradesh. And if you take Assam, in the context of Assam, we have this Manas and Dibru Saikhawa. Manas and Dibru Saikhawa, right? And then Meghalaya, we are having Nokrek. Meghalaya, we are having Nokrek. So northern side, northeastern side, Kanchenjunga, Dihang Dibang in Arunachal Pradesh, Dibru Saikhawa and Manas in Assam, Nokrek in Meghalaya, Nokrek in Meghalaya, right? Then we move on to the south. In the south, we are having, yesterday I told you about Gulf of Mannar, 21 islands, Gulf of Mannar. Then Agastamalai, in between Kerala and Tamil Nadu, in between Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Then we are having Nilgiris, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala, three states. Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. Right. Then, in the context of Andhra Pradesh, Sheshachalam. Sheshachalam is known for red sanders. The movie Pushpa. Right. Sheshachalam. So here it is in the Eastern Ghats. Eastern Ghats. Sheshachalam Biosphere Reserve. And then we move on to the western part, Run of Kutch in Gujarat. Run of Kutch in Gujarat, right? And then central portion of India, Madhya Pradesh. So it has Pachmarai, then Panna, Pachmarai, Panna, and the Biosphere Reserve, which is in between the two states. That is after the creation of Chhattisgarh. We find this one, Achankar Amarkantak, Achankar Amarkantak, Chhattisgarh and the Madhya Pradesh, right? Then Odisha. Odisha has two biosphere reserves. That is, sorry, one biosphere reserve called as Simlifal Biosphere Reserve, and then Sundarban Biosphere Reserve of West Bengal. Sundarban Biosphere Reserve of West Bengal. So totally, we are having 18 biosphere reserves, which are spread in north, south, east, and west. If any biosphere is in the news, then you have to make the data of that. Since from 1 or 2 years, if it is there in the news, you have to make the data of that. Right. So read them, go through the maps every time when you are reading the biosphere reserves. And this map you should keep in the mind. Now, out of this 18 biosphere reserves, 12 biosphere reserves in India, which are referred as World Network of Biosphere Reserves. And these are that 12 biosphere reserves. And the last one which was added was Panna Biosphere Reserve. Panna Biosphere Reserve was added in the last times. Right. Simlipal Biosphere Reserve is there. Simlipal National Park is there. Simlipal Tiger Reserve is also there. So you can have all the three names. So Biosphere Reserve is there. National Park is there. and Simlifal Tiger Reserve is also there. And Simlifal Tiger Reserve is in the news because of black tigers. In current affairs, you come across Simlifal Tiger Rivers, Simlifal Tiger Reserves. So there we find the tiger reserves which are referred as black strip tigers because of pseudomelanism. Because of pseudomelanism. And this, not panthers, black tigers, black tiger. Black panther is different, black tiger. And they are making all the efforts to create the first black tiger sanctuary in the world. So they will be creating first black tigers sanctuary, sorry, black tiger safari in the world. Black tiger safari. So rather than melanistic, you say pseudo-melanistic. Pseudo means false strips. It is due to genes mutation. Genes mutation, right? So black color which dominates the Simlifal Tiger Reserve. Simlifal Tiger Reserve, right? So sometimes such questions can be here. So don't get confused. Simlifal has biosphere reserve. It is also a tiger reserve there. And we also find the national park in that areas, right? So out of that 18, 12 are referred as the world network of biosphere reserves, right? Simlifal, Pachmari, Nokrek. So these may not be important, but the last one which was added is Panna, Madhya Pradesh, which is included in the world network of biosphere reserve. World network of biosphere reserve. Now this Panna is also in the news. Why? Because Panna is associated with the India's first interstate river linking project. Panna is associated with India's first interstate river linking project. Which are the two rivers? Which are the two rivers where we find the interstate river linking of these two will make the impact on submergence of Panna, right? So two tributaries of Narmada, we refer that as Ken Betwa. Ken Betwa. So these are the two tributaries of the Yamuna. Ken and Betwa are two tributaries of Yamuna. And the idea of linking Ken and Betwa is to provide irrigation facilities to drought prone area. Which is that drought prone area? The idea is not Tista. Don't go with Tista. It is Ken Betwa. The main idea of Ken Betwa linkage is to provide irrigation facilities to Bundelkhand region. Irrigation to Bundelkhand region. This is your geography. Bundelkhand region. So these are the things which you should keep in the mind. So whenever when you are reading, it's not about just the facts. It is the first interstate, not interstate. Ken Betwa. Ken and Betwa are tributaries of Yamuna. It is transferring surplus water from Ken to Betwa. Transferring the surplus water from Ken to Betwa. Surplus to deficit. So Ken has surplus water and Betwa has deficit water. And it is to provide irrigation to the drought prone regions of Bundelkhand. And here the concern is the submergence of the Panna Tiger Reserve. And Panna is also known for diamonds. So hence Panna is also referred as Emerald Forest of India. Panna is also referred as Emerald Forest of India. Emerald means diamond. Diamond. So all these you should keep in the mind when you are attempting your prelims questions. Is that clear? So out of 18, 12 are referred as the world network of biosphere reserves. Facts. Right. Now next is Shola forest. So Shola forest, the moment when we say, you should remember Shola forest is a combination of grass and trees. It is unique type of vegetation. It is very unique type of vegetation, not on the ground, but above 1500 meters sea level. Unique type of vegetation, which is above 1500 meters of sea level. So generally we say ASL, above sea level, 1500 meters above sea level, above sea level. And this Shola forest is unique because it is a combination. It is a combination of grassland plus tree. Both are there. It has grasses along with the trees. It's a combination of grassland and the trees. And this Shola forest is found in the Western Ghats. Western Ghats. Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. Right, combination. And we refer this as rolling grass. This is called as rolling grass. Now here, if you see the characteristics of that, the trees are not very big. The trees are not very big. They are stunted trees, short trees, short or stunted trees. Right. Then apart from that, these trees have fleshy leaves. They have fleshy leaves which store water. So hence, these Shola forests are also referred as overhead tanks. They are also referred as overhead water tanks. Overhead water tank. Now these leaves changes their color when they reach to maturity. The leaves changes their color when they reach to maturity. Leaves changes color when they reach to maturity. Now such types of vegetation we refer them as Shola forests. And the Shola forest is in the news because of the Ramsar wetland. One of the Ramsar wetland is in the Shola forest. The Shola forest is in the news because out of the 5 wetlands, out of the 5 Ramsar wetlands which were announced in the year 2024, one of the wetland is in the Shola forest. So hence the Shola forest is a concern. Now the Shola forest also has threat of alien species, threat of deforestation, threat of illegal mining there, illegal mining. And fourth is drought due to climate change. And agricultural crops which have been introduced here. Agricultural crops like coffee, spices, etc. So these are the major threats associated with the Shola forests. Major threats associated with the Shola forest. Right. So don't confuse them. They are not the deciduous forest. Deciduous forest is different. These are different. They don't shed their leaves. Deciduous forests shed their leaves. These will not shed their leaves. So don't get confused. So I told it is unique. It is unique type of vegetation. Is that clear? Okay. Now next is man-animal conflict. Now what is man-animal conflict? As I told that man-animal conflict is an incidences where wild animals, they come in contact in the human habitations, where they affect the agricultural crops, they affect the domesticated animals, and sometimes they impact humans also, injuries, etc. Injuries also. Sometimes they come in contact with the electric lines which have been created by human beings there. We refer that as electrocation. Sometimes electrocation. Right. All these happens when the wild animals leave their habitat and enter into human settlements. When they leave their habitat and enter into human settlements. Right. So many episodes are there, like a train which hit the elephants entering into the agricultural fields, like we have seen in Kerala. A man was killed, a worker was killed. So such types of impacts we refer them as man-animal conflict. And generally, when we talk about the definition of that, man-animal conflict is when there is an encounter between the human and wildlife, which leads to crops loss, livestock, and huge amount of losses are there. So it will always create large amount of socio-economic losses. economic losses, right? And if you take the data, if you take the data of government, according to 2023, which was released, 8,887 wild animal attacks were there, and out of that, majority was by elephants, followed by wild boars, what you have read in Kerala and northeastern sides. Boars are there, then we find the leopards are there, which makes very huge impact, then the tigers, then we are having bisons. So we find many herbivores, many carnivores, they enter into human settlements, and that is where accidentally they come in contact with the agricultural or human settlements. They do not have any such intention, but when their habitats are destroyed, accidentally they come in contact, by which they create huge amount of socio-economic losses, right? So here you have to remember these perspectives. These are the datas. And apart from that, it says that of the 98 reported deaths, 27 were due to elephant attacks, maybe in Odisha, maybe in Kerala, or maybe in the northeastern sides, right? And then you find large amount of crop losses were there, and domestic animals have been killed, like the cattles, the buffaloes, the livestock resources of the farmers have been killed here. Now, many incidences are there, like electrocutions are there, train colliding to the bison, where it lost its life immediately, right? So, such incidences we find, maybe for poaching, that means their skins are used, their tusks are used, ivory poaching, like tusks. So all these are referred as man animal conflicts. Now if you see generalization of that, sometimes you find them, they are entering into villages when the population has increased, we have encroached that areas, and they do not have much food, so they will enter into that areas. Or sometimes we find the cheetahs in the educational institutions which are built near the forest areas, residential schools, or complexes which have been constructed, apartments which are constructed in the areas which are closer to the forest regions, because we are encroaching to that areas, we are encroaching to their areas due to increasing of the population. Sometimes bisons entering into the urban regions here. So in that case, injuries can be human beings, and the animal itself can be killed here, animal itself can be killed here. And whenever when we talk about that, many such incidences we find, which we refer them as the man animal conflicts. Now what are the okay, so he has made some mistake here in the ppts. So from 142 you directly moved on to 169. 142 to directly 169 slab. So in between that, he has added ozone path. So there is some error which has been done. So apologies for that. So 142, when we talk about that, I told this is the man-animal conflict, right? Now we have to move on directly to that 162 phase. 169. So 142 to 169. What are the reasons for the man-animal conflict? The reasons for man-animal conflict. Man-animal conflict. Now here The reasons are fragmentation of habitats, that is destroying the continuation of forest, destroying the continuation of forest, and the forests are seen in patches. The forest become patches, and when they become into patches, we refer that as honeycombing. We refer this as honeycombing. Honeycombing. Right. So fragmentation of habitats. So when their residential areas are destroyed, they leave their habitat for the need of food. So they come out of their habitat for food, for water, etc. So we refer that as the perspective of fragmentation of habitat. Then habitat destruction. Fragmentation means reducing them into small patches. We refer that as honeycombing. Honeycombing. Habitat destruction. So this habitat destruction may be due to construction activities, or maybe some projects which have been taken there. Projects which are taken here, where their habitats are destroyed. And because of that, again, they move out of their habitats. Natural factors like earthquake, forest fires, drought, heavy floods, etc. So because of that also, they move out of the forest areas for food. They move out of the forest areas for the search of food, water, etc. Water, etc. Then increase in the species population. You should remember that these species will never coexist. So there is always a competition among the species. Species always compete. They always compete for niche, compete for their ecological niche. Right. So they compete for food, they compete for habitat. So there is no coexist. No coexist. And this is what we have did in something called as the competition exclusion principle, or Gauss law. Competition exclusion principle or Gauss law. Then invasive species. Invasive species. So whenever invasive species colonize that area, when the invasive species colonize that area, then the herbivores, they cannot have safe movement. They leave their areas. They leave their areas and enter into habitats. The herbivores, when they do not have the food. Now when the herbivores moves outside, and they will be followed by carnivores. When the deer moves outside, then the carnivores will also move. So they will be followed by carnivores, will follow them. Right. So here herbivores means it can be the example of example, you can take elephant. When they do not have the food, then they will move on to the agricultural tracts. Deers, they can move on to their agriculture. Now to hunt the deer, the cheetahs and tigers will also move. So we refer that as invasive species. Then climate change. Climate change, where we find rainfall patterns have been affected. Take an example of the world's largest wetland, Panthanal wetland, where there is not much of water left out. So these climate change, which introduces the drought-like conditions, which introduced large amount of heat waves, etc., which in turn creates many issues like forest fires, which make the species to move out of that. Then in the context of the tribal peoples, they reach to the forest areas for collection of resources. Tribal peoples who are staying in that, or fringe communities, they depend on forest resources like fuel woods. Right. So they collect fuel wood resources or minor products for their livelihood, minor forest products. So when they visit to these areas, then they will accidentally come in contact with the tigers or leopards, which kill them. unregulated tourism. Sometimes when the human beings enter into their areas, sometimes they come in interact with the species there when during the safaris, right? So we find an interaction turns into negative aspects. We refer that as unregulated tourism. Sometimes they hit animals, or sometimes animals are hit by them. So we refer that as unregulated tourism, right? So these are referred as the reasons for the man-animal conflict, right? Then Project Tiger. Now, the moment when we say Project Tiger, in India, it was introduced in the year 1973. 1973, and in the year 2023 we completed 50 years of the Project Tiger. Now the person who is referred as the father of Project Tiger in India, or Tiger Man of India, is Kailash Sankapal, who is referred as the Tiger Man of India. And because of his effort, the Project Tiger was started in the context of India. Now this Project Tiger is centrally sponsored scheme of Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and it provide assistance to conserve the tiger reserve. Now generally when we talk about the Project Tiger Reserve, the major idea is to maintain the tiger reserve habitat. It means see that they should have proper amount of food facilities are there, they have proper amount of water facilities are there, so to maintain the tiger reserve habitat. The second aspect is to reduce the man animal conflict in that areas, reduce man animal conflict, right? Man animal conflict in that areas. And third one is to make assistance to keep the proper number, assist to keep the proper number, keep the proper number of tigers, so that is the role of Project Tiger in the year 1973. Now National Tiger Conservation Authority, and this was in the year 2005, and this is a statutory body of Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, which promotes supervising, coordination and performing the functions which are represented in the Wildlife Act of 1972. Kailash Sankala, sorry, Sankala. Apologies, apologies. Yes, it is Kailash Sankala, not Sankapal. Apologies for that. It is Kailash Sankala, right? Then National Tiger Conservation Authorities, what are its important points? You should remember that it provides statutory status to the Project Tiger. It provides statutory status to Project Tiger. Second, it coordinates between the center and states to maintain the tiger reserve. It coordinates between the center and the states. Coordination between the center and the states to manage the tiger reserve. Manage tiger reserve. So please make the correction. It is Kailash Sankala. Please make the correction. Right. And third one is to address the livelihood interest of the communities. Address livelihood interest. It means their economic activities, agriculture activities, minor timber collection, etc. So address the livelihood interest of the local people, where in the surrounding of tiger reserve. surrounding of tiger reserve, right? So these are the two terms which you should remember: Project Tiger and National Tiger Conservation Authority, NTCA. Right now, in the context of India, we come across the tiger reserves which were introduced. In some, if you take the government data of PIB, it says that according to PIB 2023, 54 tiger reserves were there. But some says 55th tiger reserve is also there. So according to 2023 data which was released by the government PIB, it says 54 tiger reserves are there. Now here numbers rather than numbers, their significance are important. Now we come across many tiger reserves which are seen to be very significant, right? So those tiger reserves which are always in the news, you should make reference of that. For example, Simlifal tiger reserve, which is in the news because of black tigers, and also for the first safari which is to be carried out in that areas, right? So always take the data of last 1 year or 2 years with reference to the tiger reserves, right? Now when you take the data, Guru Ghasidas National Park, 53rd tiger reserve, and this is constructed, or this is created in the district of Korea district of Chhattisgarh. Now here you should remember, this is very important because it makes the connectivity between this Guru Ghasidas, makes the connectivity between the two tiger reserves. One is Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve, and second one is Palamau Tiger Reserve. So it makes the safe movement of tigers from Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve to Palamau Tiger Reserve. Right. Now, where do you find the Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve? In which state you find the Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve? It is in the state of Madhya Pradesh, and Palamau Tiger Reserve is in the state of Jharkhand, Jharkhand. Right. Is it clear? Guru Ghasidas part. Then Virangana Durgavati Tiger Reserve. So according to PIB, they say that this is the 54th Tiger Reserve, which was introduced in the press conference which was given by India. So the ministry. So Virangana Durgavati Tiger Reserve is in the state of Madhya Pradesh. Right. So this was created, Madhya Pradesh, which was created by taking two wildlife sanctuaries in its core area, into its core areas. And these two wildlife sanctuaries can be asked in the examination. One is Naura Devi Wildlife Sanctuary, and second one is Durgavati Wildlife Sanctuary. Right. And apart from that, so this tiger reserve is spread in three districts. It covers the three districts. They are Sagar, Damoh, right? And one more district is there: Sagar, Damoh, and Narsinghpur. Right. Okay. So please frame your question. What is that? Done. Then Dolpur Karoli Tiger Reserve. So this is the tiger reserve in Rajasthan, and this is fifth in the state. Proposed one, fifth in the state, proposed by Ministry of Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, as per the National Tiger Conservation Authority. So it is the fifth tiger reserve in the Rajasthan. And the remaining four are Ranthambore, Sariska, Mukundra, Ramgarh. So these are the existing four. Plus one, it will be fifth one. So the forest department has successfully protected the Chambal corridor. So it means that it is along which river? Chambal river. Chambal river. Along the Chambal river. Is that clear? So such types of factual based questions can be asked in the examination. Now, these tiger populations, they are maximum more concentrated in the context of India. Now, you have to understand some perspectives. Tiger census. This census is done once in 4 years. It is done once in 4 years. And hence it is referred as 4-year cycle. The first census was done in the year 2006. The first was done in the year 2006, and the last one was the 2022. Last one was 2022, right? 2022. Now here it says that compared to 2006, 161 percentage of the tiger have been increased. So if you take the data of 2006, in the year 2006, if you take the data, so compared to 2006, where 1411 tigers were there, 1411 tigers are there. And if you take the data of 2022, the data of 2022, where we are having 3682 tigers, so there is an increase of 161%. 161% of tigers have been increased, right? Apart from that, the tigers are maximum in Madhya Pradesh. State-wise, it is Madhya Pradesh. State-wise, it is Madhya Pradesh. Please keep this in the mind. And tiger reserve-wise, highest density of the tiger reserve is found in Corbett Tiger. So density of tigers is maximum in Corbett Tiger Reserve, Jim Corbett Tiger Reserve. Right. So you should remember them in the datas. Now the factual datas when we see, it is the 2006 where 1411 were there. So generally they make the data into two ways: minimum tiger population and maximum tiger populations which they have recorded, and they make average of both. They take average of that. An average of minimum and maximum is referred as the tiger population, because counting them accuracy is bit difficult. So hence they take the minimum and maximum in different modes. Different methods are used to calculate them, and in that they will take the minimum, maximum, and average of that becomes the population. In the same way in the year 2022, the minimum tigers were 3161 and maximum were 3925, and average of that is 3682. So this is the tiger population of 2022. 3682, tiger population of 2022. Right. Now, the data says that Madhya Pradesh has highest tiger. So state-wise, don't get confused. State-wise, it is Madhya Pradesh, followed by Karnataka, followed by Karnataka, followed by Uttarakhand, followed by Maharashtra. So these are states. States. Madhya Pradesh, Karnataka, Uttarakhand, then Maharashtra. Then when we move on to the tiger reserves wise, so highest is in Jim Corbett, followed by Bandipur in Karnataka, Nagarhole in Karnataka, Bandhavgarh again in Madhya Pradesh, Dudhwa. So this is the density of the tigers. Highest density you find in Jim Corbett Tiger Reserve in Uttarakhand. So this is the tiger reserves. Be careful with the data. Then they also talk about India currently harbors 75% of the world's tiger reserves. Facts. Central India, and Shivalik Hills and Gangetic Plains. Central India and Shivalik Gangetic Plains have increased in the tiger population. Two landscapes where the tiger population has increased. Two landscapes where the tiger population has increased, right? Then state-wise, state-wise, Madhya Pradesh, Karnataka, and that. Then tiger occupancy in the Western Ghats has declined. In the Western Ghats, it has declined compared to the previous data, right? Then very alarming is there are reserves in India, five reserves in India which have no tigers. Zero tigers are there, and they are Sayadri in Maharashtra, Satkosia in Odisha, Kamalang in Arunachal Pradesh, Kaval in Telangana, and Dampa in Mizoram. So these are the five tiger reserves which have zero tigers. Zero tigers. So please keep this in the mind. Right. About the tigers. Now, next is International Big Cat Alliance. It is an initiation of India. It is initiation of India, and they have proposed that it will have headquarter also in India. Its headquarter will also be, yes, still now it is zero according to the census. Headquarters will be in India, right? It is to conservation of seven big cats, seven big cats, right? And this is to protect these 97 range countries. So it is voluntary approach which have the seven species, tigers and other species, right? Then strengthen global cooperation in these cats. Strengthen cooperation, right? Then conserving these big cats in their habitat. Now, as India has initiated here, as India has initiated, so for the first time, it has said that it has declared one-time budgetary support of 150 crores for 2023 to 2028. Is it clear? So please remember these things. Please remember these things. So please reframe your answers. Why tiger reserve? Please reframe your question so that I can answer it correctly. Right. Now these are referred as the tiger landscapes in India. So Shivalik and the Gangetic landscape where the tiger reserve have increased. And the Western Ghats where the tiger reserve have, sorry, the tiger populations have decreased. Has decreased. So these are referred as landscapes where we find many tiger reserves are there. Is it clear? So this is central India, and this is Shivalik. So in the central India, it has increased, and in the Shivalik, it has increased. So two landscapes where the tiger population has increased, central and Shivalik, and it has decreased in the Western Ghat tiger landscape. So it's still referred as a tiger reserve only. So maybe they may relocate the tigers. So still they are referred as tiger reserves only. So even today we refer them as tiger reserves, but it does not have any tiger reserves there. So no tiger, but still we refer them as tiger reserves, right? Then there is something called as cats. Cats is conservation assured tiger standards. Conservation assured tiger standards. Now this is all associated with something called as the event which took place in the year 2010, which is called as St. Petersburg Declaration of Russia. St. Petersburg Declaration. Right. Now, according to St. Petersburg Declaration, which was in the year 2010, the idea was to double the tiger population by 2022. And in this context, they needed good standards which have to be maintained by tiger reserve. So that's why in the year 2013, they introduced something called as conservation assured tiger standards, which is referred as CATS. So CATS is something which is referred as the best practices which are followed, best practices and standards. to be followed by tiger reserves, which are followed by tiger reserves. Best practices and standards followed by tiger reserve, which are maintained them. We say of international standards. International standards. So such tigers, we refer them as the cats or conservation assured tiger reserves. And in the year 2023, these six were got the status of CATS. Six tiger reserve got the status of CATS, and they are the Kali Tiger Reserve, Melghar Tiger Reserve, Pilibhit Tiger Reserve, Tadoba Andori, Navegaon, and Periyar. So, including these six, at present, there are 23 tiger reserves in India, which have the CAT standards, which has the conservation assured tiger standards. 23 tiger reserve has the standards. Now, apart from that, so here they also provide an award called as T into 2 award. T into 2 awards. Now, T into 2 awards are given to those tiger reserves where the tiger population has doubled, where the population of tiger has been doubled by them. Now, in the year 2023, three tiger reserves of India, they received 3 into 2 awards. They received 2 into 2 awards. Now, which are the three tiger reserves which received the doubling tiger population in the context of India? So, Pench Tiger Reserve. Pench Tiger Reserve. It is spread in 2 states. One in Maharashtra. You should be very careful. One in Maharashtra. And second one is in Madhya Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh. Pench Tiger Reserve. And the third one is again the tiger reserve which is there in Maharashtra called as, Madhya Pradesh, Satpura Tiger Reserve. Satpura Tiger Reserve. So these are the tiger reserves which received the T+2 award in the 2023, and these are the tiger reserves which received the CATS standards. Yes, they are found in many countries, not only in India, in the neighboring areas also we find them. In the neighboring areas also we find them. Right. Then, status of leopard of India, which was given in the year recently, which has been released. And this is also the 5th cycle, along with that of that. So this leopard population is also calculated once, or it is counted once in 4 years. It is also done once in 4 years. And this is done by National Tiger Conservation Authority along with the Wildlife Institution of India in collaboration with the State Forest. So National Tiger Conservation Authority along with the Wildlife Institution of India and with the Forest Department of the concerned state. Now here the facts are: India's population of leopard is 13,874. That is minimum and maximum and average of that. It is 8% rise compared to 2018. So compared to 2018, it has increased. Now, the highest leopard population, Madhya Pradesh is having the highest, followed by Maharashtra, followed by Karnataka, and followed by Tamil Nadu. So this is about the data. And if you take the status of the leopard, it is vulnerable in IUCN, Appendix 1 of CITES, and Schedule 1 of Wildlife Act of 1972. So please remember these facts. Facts which can be asked in your prelims examination. Right. Then this is about their conditions, the datas. So if you see that in the central India and Eastern Ghats, their population has increased 8,820, and maximum is found in the Madhya Pradesh. So these all are in the central India and eastern Ghats, right? And Karnataka, Goa, they all in the western Ghats, in the western Ghats. Arunachal Pradesh, Assam and North. So these all in the northeastern part of the list, right? So this is about their range wise. See the facts carefully. There may be question on range wise, or there may be question on the state wise. And this is 2018 and this is 2022. So compared to 2018, so in 2018 it was 12,852. From here it has reached to this value, 13,874, right? So this is the facts you should keep in the mind. Then Terai Arc landscape. Now, what is Terai Arc landscape? So Terai Arc landscape is an area. It is 810-kilometer long area, and it is in between the two river systems in the east and in the west. In the east, it is having the river called as, sorry, in the west, it is having river Yamuna, which is the border here, Yamuna. And in the east, it is Bhagmati river. Bagmati. And this Tarayak landscape is in between two countries, India and Nepal. And Nepal. And in India, three states are there. Three states are there. And these are UP, Uttarakhand, and Bihar. UP, Uttarakhand, and Bihar. Three states of India. And this region is having very good amount of protected areas. So it has many national parks are there, many wildlife sanctuaries are there, tiger reserves are there. So if any tiger reserve or anything in the news, you should make a list of that. Apart from that, this area is known for three flagship species. So this Tarai Arc landscape has three flagship species. And these three flagship species are, it consists of one horned rhino, it consists of elephant, and Royal Bengal tiger. So these three are referred as the flagship species. Now, why they are referred as flagship species? So they are referred as flagship species because they are in the verge of extinction. They are the iconic species which are in the verge of extinction. It means they are about to end. They are in the verge of extinction. And hence they need to be more protected. So that's why these flagship species are also referred as ambassador species. They're also referred as ambassador species. They're also referred as ambassador species. Why? So that to draw the attention for conservation. Ambassador species to draw attention of government, NGOs, local people, etc., to draw attention for conservation. Right. So we refer them as Terai Arc landscapes. Very important. And this is an area where good amount of tiger reserves are there, good amount of elephant reserves are there, and also we find national parks which are in this particular region. Is it clear? Okay. Terai Arc landscape. Then Project Lion. It was introduced in the year 2020, and it is to protect and conserve the Asiatic lion, and it is endemic to Gir forest of Gujarat. Gujarat. And it is listed in Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. And it is also in the Appendix 1 of CITES and endangered in IUCN Red List. So this is the status of this animal status. And it is one of the five pantherine cats in India: Bengal tiger, Indian leopard, snow leopard, and clouded leopard. So out of that five, this is one. Right. So Bengal tiger, Indian leopard, snow leopard, clouded leopard, and this lion. Right. Project Lion. Now, when we talk about the lion population, the lion population has increased tremendously according to the government data compared to 2015 to 2020. They found the population has increased from 523 to 674. 523 to 674. 674. That is from 2015 to 2020. The data, right? And they were confined to Gujarat. Now, the major problem is not about increasing in the population. Due to increase in the population, major issues were there. Issues were, as the population increased there, so it means that competition will be there. So due to increase in the population, so there will always be conflict or competition, which can displace the other animals, or sometimes this lion can be injured when it attacked by some other. So increasing the population was there. Second, large amount of deaths of lions were there. Large amount of deaths of the lions were there because of disease. Because of disease. And the prominent disease associated here is the canine distemper virus. Canine distemper virus. Right. And the second type of disease is babesiosis. Babesiosis. Now, canine distemper virus is viral disease, but babesiosis is a disease which is caused by protozoan. Protozoan disease, right? And this protozoa attacks RBC. It attacks RBC, red blood corpuscles of that, and that can create anemia to the lion. Which ultimately lead to the death of lions. So because of these two characteristics, the population which has increased and large amount of deaths of the lions were there due to disease like canine distemper virus and the babesiosis, then the authorities decided that why don't we make the relocation of the lions, and hence they decided of the relocation of lions, shifting the lions to different areas. So initially they identified 6 locations, but they were not very fruitful, including Kuna, Palpur, etc. But recently in the year 2023, they concluded that a safe area will be in the state, within the state, but near to the Gujarat. So this is within the state and near to the Gir forest. Near to the Gir forest. And this idea or this particular area is referred as the Barda Wildlife Sanctuary. So Gujarat government has planned to translocate to the Barda Wildlife Sanctuary. Barda Wildlife Sanctuary within the state. Right. And here in the Barda Wildlife Sanctuary, last time Asiatic lion was sighted some 144 million years. So Barda is not new. So 144 years ago, lion was sighted here. It was sighted here. Now, the major problem associated here is the Maldhari communities. These are the pastoral communities. They keep on moving. And these Maldhari communities, they depend on Banni grassland of Gujarat. Banni grassland of Gujarat. And displacement and resettlement of that is major problem. So they have to settle the displacements and settlement of Maldharis. And Maldhari communities, they keep the buffalo called as Banni buffalo. They have the buffalo which is bunny buffalo. Bunny buffalo. Is it clear? So it is having a major problem. Rehabilitation should be given to them. Then only they can make a safe location for the lions, because they have to make the accommodation for Maldaris. And these Maldaris are very significant. They are the local people which depend on the bunny grasslands, and they have a unique type of buffalo called as bunny buffalo. And this bunny buffalo is very important because it can survive in the extreme climatic conditions. It can survive in the water scarcity. Very significant type of buffalo. It is not like normal buffalo. It can survive in high temperature and water scarcity. This bunny buffalo can survive in water scarcity, and it also survive in high temperature. High temperature. Is it clear? So this is what we refer them as bunny grasslands and bunny buffalo, which are in the current affairs. Then, translocation of African cheetahs. So these all are facts which you should be remembering. Translocation of African cheetahs. Now, the moment when you talk about the translocation of African cheetahs, certain things you should remember. In the year 1952, Indian government, they declared the Asiatic cheetahs as extinct. In the year, India declared Asiatic cheetahs as extinct. In the year 1952. Asiatic cheetahs were extinct. Now, after that, an effort was done by India, and they reached Iran. And they requested Iran to provide the Asiatic cheetahs. And the negotiations were failed. Iran did not agree to send it. So hence the negotiations failed. To translocate the Asiatic cheetahs to India. Right. So negotiations were failed. After that, National Tiger Conservation Authority, NTSA. National Tiger Conservation Authority. So this National Tiger Conservation Authority proposed instead of Asiatic cheetahs, African cheetahs to be introduced. Proposed introduction of African cheetahs. Proposed the introduction of African cheetahs to the Supreme Court, in the Supreme Court. And this Supreme Court approved for that. And Supreme Court approved for this. Right. So there is no approved for that. So Supreme Court approved for that. And once it got approval, then this National Tiger Conservation Authority, it took no objection certificate. So because when you are making translocation, you have to get a no objection certificate from international authorities. So it has to take no objection authority or certificate from IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature. And after that, the cheetahs were introduced from two countries from Africa. That is Namibia and South Africa. And these cheetahs were introduced in Madhya Pradesh, that is Kuno National Park. So the cheetahs were introduced in that Kuno. So this is how the cheetahs story was there. Introduction. Now, in India, we have introduced African cheetahs, not Asiatic cheetahs. Now, certain points which can be for and issues. Why to introduce or translocation of cheetahs? Now, the first one is why? What are the benefits of that? The government says that this is to revive the grasslands. Why? Because cheetahs eat up the herbivores which can maintain the ecological balance. Second, if they eat the herbivores, then the grasses will not be destroyed. So it means that it will create carbon sink. It will create a carbon sink. Third, it can create a tourism called as ecotourism. Revenue, ecotourism to that areas. Is that clear? Ecotourism in that areas. Then it is also something, when we talk about the cheetahs are referred as umbrella species. Cheetahs are a group of umbrella species. They are the umbrella species. And protecting the umbrella species will conserve other species. Umbrella species, so hence they will conserve other species. Conserve other species. So this is, they say, why we are introducing that. Yes, Asiatic cheetahs are also critically endangered. We'll discuss that. First, understand this. This is why. What is the reason? This is the government. It says why we are introducing. Now, what are the issues? What are the issues associated with the introduction? So the issues is, when you introduce the cheetahs there, they can't coexist. So there will be a competition. So no coexist. No exist. So hence there will always a competition, which can a competition will be there for their niche, and in that they can get injury, or sometimes they can be a death, or sometimes they leave their habitat, which leads to man-animal conflict. So no coexistence are there. Second one is, as they increase in the areas, so the density of their population can increase. So that can lead to increase in the density of the species will increase. Right. Third one is that it can spread disease. Already they are from Africa, they can bring the disease and they can spread. So they can spread disease to the local species there. And fourth one is adaptation. It is very difficult for them to adapt from one climate to another. Adaptation issues. Then they can lead to man-animal conflict. When the species will be pushed from them, they can lead to man-animal conflict. Is that clear? So this is something about translocation of the African cheetahs and advantages and their issues. Right. Now these are the two African cheetahs, and this is Asiatic cheetahs. Asiatic cheetahs are found only in Iran. And these Asiatic cheetahs are smaller, and these Asiatic cheetahs are critically endangered species. African cheetahs are comparatively larger, and they are found in many countries. Apart from Africa, they are found in many countries, and their conservation status is they are vulnerable. Adaptation point means, so they are, this is when we say the translocation, it is translocation from continent to continent. So it is called as not only translocation, it is called as intercontinental translocation. It means that we are transferring it from Africa to Asia. Right. So the climatic conditions, the grasslands of Africa are different from what we find in India. So adaptation may be difficult for them. African grasslands, like Sahel grasslands, they are very large, and animal species are also different there. And in the Asian grasslands, they are very smaller. So hence it becomes very difficult for them to adapt from one continent to another continent. So hence adaptability becomes major problem in that part. Is it clear? Okay. Now Project Dolphin. So this was introduced again in the year 2020. And dolphin is India's national aquatic animal. It is India's national aquatic animal. aquatic animal. Now here the factual data are, it is to conserve the Gangetic dolphin, both riverine as well as oceanic, freshwater as well as saline water. And these are found in Ganga, Meghna, Brahmaputra river systems of India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. And they are classified as endangered in IUCN Red List, Schedule 1 of Wildlife Act 1972, Appendix 1 of CITES, and Appendix 2 of CMS. So they are the categories in which they see. And then Vikramshila Gangetic Dolphin Sanctuary is the only dolphin sanctuary where we are having the protection, conservation, and studying of Project Dolphin. Maybe if any new thing is created, so that becomes your current affairs. If any new is created, then that becomes your current affairs, right? 5th October is referred as National Ganga River Dolphin Day. National River Ganga National Ganga River Dolphin Day, 5th October, right? So this is where the dolphins are seen. Map perspectives. So these all are facts. Keep on remembering the facts. They are very important and vital for your prelims examination. Right. So next, we move on to Project Elephant. And this Project Elephant was introduced in the year 1992, but it did not have legal status. It was not having a legal status like the Project Tiger. So no legal status. No legal status like Project Tiger. So hence in the year 2023, what they did is they merged the Project Elephant with the Project Tigers. So merging was done. Merging was done. So this Project Elephant was merged with Tiger. Elephant was merged with the Project Tiger in the year 2023, and it is referred as Project Tiger and Elephant Division. From 2023, it is referred as Project Tiger and Elephant Division. Tiger and Elephant Division. So many people have raised their voices why you are merging them. It becomes very difficult to manage the tigers. Then how we can manage the elephant perspectives as well. So this is the fact which you should remember. So before 2023 or till 2023, the Project Elephant did not have any type of legal status. Now to provide them as a legal status, to take more impact on conservation, so we have combined the Project Elephant with Project Tiger, and we refer that as Project Tiger and Elephant Division. Now if you take the elephants in India we are having 60% of Asiatic elephants. 60% of Asiatic elephants are there. Highest is in Karnataka, followed by Assam and Kerala, according to the census. Karnataka, followed by Assam, then by Kerala. Now at present we are having 33 elephant reserves. At present we are having 33 elephant reserves. So the recent one, when we say, right, in 14 major elephant states. So 14 elephant states are there, where 33 are there. Terai Elephant Reserve, 33rd one. And this Terai Elephant Reserve is in the state of Uttarakhand. It is in the state of Uttarakhand. Is that clear? Then when we talk about this Lemur, sorry, not Uttarakhand, Terai is in Uttar Pradesh. Apologies, in UP. UP. And then Lemur in Chhattisgarh. Then Agasthamalai Tiger Reserve in Tamil Nadu. So this is 32nd and this is 31st. Tiger Reserve in the context of India. Right. So please remember these things. 33rd, 32nd and 31st. Right. Now Ramsar wetlands. So I'll just give the data of Ramsar wetlands, and remaining we will discuss on Monday. So Ramsar wetlands. So at present, when we talk about Ramsar wetlands, 75 Ramsar wetlands were there. and 5 new were added in the list. 5 new were added, and these are protected in collaboration with IUCN, BirdLife International, Wetland International, and all these. The 5 which were added are 3 from Karnataka, and 2 from Tamil Nadu. 2 from Tamil Nadu. And the moment when they added the Tamil Nadu, when they added the list of Tamil Nadu, so Tamil Nadu at present has 16 Ramsar wetlands, which is highest number of wetlands in any states. So by addition of that, Tamil Nadu has highest number of wetlands, highest number of Ramsar wetlands in India, in India, right? And and here, if you take that, 3 which are there in Karnataka are Agnishani, Magdi, and Ankan Samudra one. And in Tamil Nadu, we are having Longwood and Kariveti bird sanctuaries. So these are 3 plus 2. And the facts about them are here. Ankan Samudra is man-made. Magdi is also man-made. Agnishani is an estuary, west-flowing river. This is called as an estuary rivers. So here you have to remember the facts which are given in the statements. Like vulnerable species are there, near threatened species. They may ask the same in the prelims. In the prelims. So go through these facts which are very important for your exam point of view. Longwood Shola Reserve. I told you about Shola Forest. Shola Forest in Tamil Nadu. So I given the data about these. Right now, here when we talk about the books, I have taken it from current affairs down to earth. Many magazines I have compiled, and many data I have compiled. So it's not from one special book. So it is a compilation from many data, current affairs, and own approach is there. So I can tell you that you can go with these PPTs, annotated PPTs, and keep them as your reckoner for revisions and all. Believe in the PPTs. And regarding the textbooks, so you can take any books which are good in the market perspective. Some say Shankar IS Academy, some say the Kuller's book is there. I'm not telling that any book is best or any book is worst, but take the topic wise and read them rather than reading all the books. Pick up the topics and read them, and always link your reading with current affairs. Then only you will have a good flow in the context of your studies. Is it clear? So don't get much confused. Keep this PPTs and the content. So another 5 or 6 days we'll complete all. So Monday I'll be taking up, along with the small portion is there, then I'll take ozone depletion, and then global warming will start. So Tuesday we'll complete global warming and climate change, and remaining days we will take up the topics like uh, the pollution, forests, solid waste management, environment impact assessment, etc. So we will be covering all the topics without keeping anything untouched there. So take care, revise in the weekend, and come back with all the aspects of climatology covered in your geography. So please read about jet streams, please read about the polar vortex, etc., which you have done in your climatology. And if you are good in the basics of climatology, then it will be easy for you to understand the global warming, climate change, and ozone depletion. So please revise your topics of climatology, maybe jet streams, the wind patterns, the polar vortex, all those, Headley cell, Ferrel cell, polar cell. So please read them. What is Headley cell? What is Ferrel cell? What is polar cell? What is jet stream? So please read them. And then the moment when we come back on Monday, we will cover all the aspects there. Take care, be happy, don't get worried, don't get much stress, enjoy the weekends, and also make the revision. So we'll meet up on Monday. Till then, bye bye.